demanded by the society. And when the resources are used, it has to be used in the most efficient manner, so that the society's well-being will be taken care of. So I usually in my normal lecture, this circular flow will be discussed at the end of my lecture. But here because of the, we have short time, I thought it would be good if I start with this first. In an economy, we have households, okay? Households are the owners of the resources. As I mentioned just now, resources, consist of, labor, okay, workers, land, capital, and entrepreneur. So households will be basically providing, in economics we say selling, because there's a value to it. We get return or payment for these resources that we have. For example, for land, we get return in terms of rent. Labor, we get wages. Capital, we get interest. This is from conventional economic perspective. Entrepreneurs, they get profit. Okay, so household will be providing or selling their resources to the resource market. So who uses these resources? Basically businesses, producers. So farmers, fishermen, whoever they are in the business community, they will be using these resources. Okay, it becomes cost to them because they're using, and it become a cost. So they use these resources for what? Basically use these resources to produce goods and services. Okay, they produce goods and services, not only goods, services as well. When we say services, it can be bus service that we take, taxi or restaurant, and all these are included as services. Goods, we know what it is. So when businesses produce goods and services, they get revenues, right? So you see in this diagram, the outer part arrow, the green color, are the reward or the return for what the economic agents are getting. For example, like what are the costs or what are the revenues and so on. And then when these resources are used to produce goods and services, who is going to utilize this? Households or whoever is demanding for these products. It may not be household alone. It can be businesses also purchasing some of the, because it depends on inputs, whether it's raw materials or it is intermediate goods or it's final goods. Final goods, definitely it will be by households. So this is how the economy runs. This is the market mechanism, how it functions. When there's no, the mechanism is functioning effectively, then the economy will be run in the best way, and the society's well-being will be there at the maximum level. So this is a summarized version of the circular. We call it the circular flow model. Okay, and I also like to start with this also, just to give you a summary. What microeconomic study or theory covers basically in a particular course? What are the areas that are covered? Microeconomics basically have, the way I look at it, it's divided into three, maybe four, but I will say it's three. You can see the three different colors that I have highlighted: market, market structure, and resource market. So the emphasis, if you see, a lot of discussion is on the market itself. Okay, market is where the goods and services are produced. So the way the market function will be depending on the economic system that particular country is adapting or implementing, whether it's a capitalist system, is socialist system, Islamic economic system, or mixed economy, or what. Okay, so depending on the economic system, it will determine the efficiency, the way the resources are allocated, and how the products are distributed, and so on. Okay, how the economic agents will be functioning also will be dependent on economic system. So understanding the economic system is also very important, and it's part of the discussion that we have in the microeconomics course usually. So under the market, we have demand and supply. That's a basic one. That's about market. In the market, we have demand and supply. We have consumers and producers. That's the topic that we'll be discussing after this. And then we have consumer behavior. basically consumer behavior is about how consumer decide with the resources they have in their hand, the money that they have, they want to buy various things, and what are the, and with the assumption of the, consumers want to maximize their satisfaction in the conventional economic theory, how with the prices for the products and the services. So they have three things here. You have consumers who have the resources, money, and then the product have cost, that is price, and then the consumers have desires in terms of preferences, what they like. They like apple or oranges. So with these three components, how they then decide, to buy what products and how many products that they will buy. So this is what essentially what we discussed, or what the theory on consumer behavior is all about. And then we have elasticity. Elasticity is very important concept, policy-wise as well. A lot of policies have failed, especially when the policymakers do not understand the concept of elasticity. What is elasticity? Basically, we know in the market, price changes, price go up and go down. And in response to the changes in the price, consumers and also producers or sellers will respond to the change in the price. So, so when I say policy, so that's basically elasticity about. It's about elastic means this: how responsive is the consumers and producers in when price changes in the market. So when we talk about responding to change in the price, policy done by the government can also have effect on prices. For example, cigarettes. Government impose excise tax on cigarettes. So what happens when there's a tax? The price of cigarette will go up. Okay. Now, if we do not understand the nature of the elasticity of the consumer's demand for cigarette, such policy may not be effective. By increasing the price using tax, will the consumption of cigarette reduce? Okay, so this is something that needs to be thought about, because when it's too expensive, what will be the implication, and whether there's any impact on the consumption of cigarette or not. So understanding elasticity of demand and also supply is very important, not only for the businesses. Okay, businesses also, when they do sale, where they want to increase the price, they want to reduce the price, they want to give discount, they need to understand the elasticity of demand. So, and also supply, so that whatever decision they are making will be effective. So that's on elasticity. I don't think that's covered in this particular course, probably, but those who are interested in extending further in case they want to go further, elasticity is a very interesting topic. And then market failure. Because in conventional economics, they assume that when there's no interference in the market, when government don't interfere, you just allow the market forces to function, the market will function effectively. There will be efficiency. I will be discussing that also. However, there are certain products, like for example, products that have public products like schools, hospitals. If you expect market to produce, it will not be there. So there should be government intervention or some kind of other external intervention to make sure the product is available. And sometimes certain products, I will also discuss this later in the market discussion, how market can fail. I think there will be also a discussion in detail by Dr. Husna on related to environment. So you will be seeing that discussion in market failure. So also it is one of the topics that I really like. It's very interesting. So that's on market. And then market structure. Market structure is about how different industries or businesses are classified and differentiated based on the degree of competition in the market. There are four types. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Basically, there are four types. Perfect competition, where it is assumed there's really pure perfect competition in the market. And then we have monopolistic competition, monopoly and oligopoly. Okay, so this is and how the firms will behave and how they, to what extent, what are the quantity of products they produce, what are the prices they charge, and things like that will be discussed in market structure. And then we have resource market. Resource market is about also similar to market for goods and services. It's demand and supply for labor, demand and supply for capital and land will decide the prices and also quantity produced in a particular market. That's on resource market, basically factors of production. And then we also have discussion on finally, and it's other topics that are not really covered, but it's also very important in microeconomics at foundation level, related to international trade, okay, agriculture economics, health economics, energy, and many others. Okay, so basically this is the coverage in microeconomics theory. Okay, so now we go into the introduction itself. Usually at introduction, we discuss on the basic foundation, why there is, there's studies on economics, especially microeconomics. Now, the foundation of economic analysis, especially microeconomics, is based on two fundamental facts. One, we know as a consumer, as a human being, as a society, our material wants are unlimited. Of course, in Islam, I will discuss that later. We have to constrain that within our, the Islamic Sharia and Islamic principles. When we say unlimited, then we can be doing anything. That's not right. But generally, what it means is that our wants are, when we say our wants are unlimited, when we have, let's say, a small car. So as our income goes up, we want a bigger car, for example. Okay, so as we want more and more, if possible, that's a human nature. Okay, so that's a human nature in terms of wants, it's unlimited. But to meet these wants, we need resources. And these resources are scarce, whether it's money in your pocket, whether it is land, it's capital, or in terms of workers, and so on. And natural resources like oil, plantations and things like that. Mining, all the other things, like steel and all kind of other stuff. All these resources are scarce. When we say resources, as I mentioned earlier, is include land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurship. Now, so when we have human wants that are unlimited, resources that are scarce, then we have the problem of scarcity. Scarcity, okay? So the economic study is about this. How, with the limited resources, we're going to satisfy the unlimited wants of the human being. Okay, that's basically the idea. Every topics that we go through in microeconomics will be coming back to this conclusion. How efficient is the resources being utilized? There are two assumptions. We assume that we have to assume this, otherwise it's difficult to do analysis. We assume that human beings are rational, they have rational behavior. And it is also assumed that consumers, when they want to consume something, they want to maximize their own satisfaction. When you buy something, this is from conventional economic theory. When they buy something, they want to satisfy their wants, whatever their own satisfaction. If I buy apple, that's because I like the apple, not because someone else likes the apple, unless it's a family matter. We're talking about individuals. So we want to, when we consume, we want to maximize our own satisfaction. Producers, when they produce, they sell, they want to maximize profit. Okay? So this is the basic assumptions that are being used for developing the theory. So it is important to understand that when we say rational self-interest, it is not the same as selfishness. Self-interested behavior is simply behaving in such a way that they want to increase their personal satisfaction. That's what it means. It doesn't mean selfish. Okay, and we're also talking about relative scarcity and not absolute scarcity. Okay. Now, given this, that resources are scarce and human wants are unlimited, we have to, every time we have to make choices. Even time, we only have 24 hours. You have to make choices, whether you want to sleep or you want to study, or you want to pray or you want to watch movie. You want to go to mosque or you want to pray at home. These are choices we have to have all the time have to make because we have time that are limited. So when we are making choices, we have to make sacrifice. When we say sacrifice, when I get this, I have to forgo this. I cannot get everything in life. So that's what we mean by choices and sacrifice. in economics, we call this as opportunity cost. So it is one very important part of the microeconomic theory is the theory of opportunity cost, because everything that we do, there's opportunity cost. Okay, there's choices have to be made. So economic study is about these choices, okay, and how these choices need to be made to ensure there's efficiency, the resources are allocated in the best manner as possible. So when we are talking about sacrifice or opportunity cost, we are making choices, and these choices are made by assumption, made in a rational way, and therefore we call it as rational choices. Okay, when we say what we mean by rational choices? Rational choices is every time that you want to make a decision on something, on an action that you want to make, whether it's a consumption or in the production or in the labor market or whatever, the decision has to weigh what is the additional. When you say marginal in economics, it means additional. What is the additional benefit that I'm going to get by consuming, let's say I want to buy Apple, okay, compared to, let's say I want to, we have cake and we have apple. If I buy apple, more apple, I have to sacrifice cake because I have limited resources. So when I want to buy apple, in this case, I must consider what is the additional benefit that I'm going to get by having additional apple. What is the additional cost? How much is the price? Okay, so we, as a consumer or producer or resource owners, we always make rational choices, weighing between what is the additional benefit that we're going to get by that decision and what is the additional cost. So that is what we mean by rational choices. Okay. Now, as I mentioned just now, we have resources. When we are using the resources, regardless of whether it's consumers or producers or resource owners, these resources must be used in a most efficient and optimal way. All right. So the key word in the study of microeconomic is efficiency. Efficiency. Okay, it's very important. So in any topic that you discuss, we'll be always coming back to optimality, efficiency, optimality, efficiency. Okay, this is keyword in microeconomics. So efficiency in economics can be divided into two when we are using the resources. One is full production. So it's related to production. So basically it means where resources are utilized in such a way that it provides maximum satisfaction of human or society's materials want. Okay. So full production is divided into two. One is productive efficiency. Productive comes from the word production. So it means that when the economy is producing some products or services, the methods used must be very efficient. Why is it important? When the technology, the method used in production is the best, the most efficient, then the cost of production will be the lowest. When the cost of production is the lowest, then the producer can sell the product at the lowest price. So when the producers are selling at the lowest price, what is the benefit of it? The benefit is the society will get the products and services at the lowest cost possible. So productive efficiency is about the lowest cost possible, basically utilizing the best technology available to produce goods and services at the lowest cost possible, least cost possible. So having products and services produced at the lowest cost will actually bring about society's well-being. Welfare will be maximized because we are paying for goods and services at the lowest price. So consumer will benefit. Producers also, when they produce at the lowest cost, they will have higher profit. So that's productive efficiency. Another part of full production is allocative efficiency. Allocative, the word comes from allocation. It means when the available resources are used to produce goods and services, the goods and services produced must be what the society wants most. If the society wants rice, but the resources are used to produce wheat, will the society's wants achieved? No, it will not be fulfilling the society's want. We want to rice, but whatever resources available in the country is used to produce wheat. So this wheat is maybe sold at a higher price, maybe exported or what. The people don't eat wheat that much. They eat rice. So where are they going to get the rice? Maybe they have to import. The price will be high. They don't get what they want. They go to the shop. There's not much rice available and things like that. So they are not getting what they want most. So therefore, when we say allocative efficiency, it means the resources available in the market must be utilized in such a manner that it will be achieving the maximum benefit or fulfilling the society's needs and wants. Okay, so that's production is related to allocation of the products and also the efficiency of the production itself. Another part which is important in the efficiency is full employment. In economics, this is a very important assumption. It is assumed that all available resources must be fully utilized. There shouldn't be any unemployed resources. If you have $10, you have to spend that $10. If it's allocated for the consumption, you spend all that money. If you have 10 acres land, all the 10 acres land must be utilized. Okay, so that's what we mean by full employment. So coming back, what is important discussion here is that in the economy, because of the limited resources, there's an issue of scarcity because human wants are unlimited and resources are scarce, and therefore choices have to be made. And these choices have to be made in such a manner that the resources are utilized in a most efficient way. Efficiency is very important in economic decision. Okay, so that's the basic concept. When we do the proper full semester course, usually we use the concept of production possibility curve to explain the concept of efficiency, how the resources are utilized in producing two goods, how the opportunity cost concept will be, explained using production possibility curve. But we are not going to do that because we don't have much time, and I think it's not really relevant for a general knowledge course like certificate course. Okay, I think it's very important for us to analyze whatever I've said earlier from the Islamic perspective. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, what is the core problem of the economics? Scarcity. Okay, and how do we see this from Islamic perspective? In Islam, the core problem is
recording in progress.
Must use knowledge, improve technical know-how and methods, basically to find ways to find where the resources are and also improve. You see, United States never had petroleum. Today, look at them. Because of the technology they have produced, they are now one of the major producers of petroleum. They don't really depend on import on petroleum because they have the technology. And we also have seen how in Qatar and in United Arab Emirates, a country which is hot, desert, they are now producing vegetables and also. Okay, so all depends on the technical know-how, technology that we have, how we are actually allocating our resources to make sure that we are utilizing the resources in the best manner. So therefore, we know that as a human being, we are created with natural greed and selfishness. Okay, so one of the reasons why there's a scarcity is not only the way we are using the resources, but also our own material wants. How we can actually control or limit our needs and wants. Okay, so we as a human being is accepted that we have some selfishness and we have emotions, we have desires. But what is important is Allah has actually given us guidelines on how to behave, how to consume, how to how to practice our daily life, and therefore it is important to curtail the desire and wants. And when we are taking any decision, is basically we have to believe that we have to know that the objective is to get the blessings of Allah and also to attain the falah. When you say falah, it means success, not only on earth, whatever activities that we are doing, but it's also achieving success in the hereafter. So therefore, in Islam, it's not just about consuming for ourselves. It is also important to think that when we consume, we are also consuming for others, and also the available resources must be, some of it must be allocated for charitable giving, for example, infaq, zakat, and wakaf. So we know that the world is a place for test. The test is how the resources that are endowed to us are redistributed and shared to ensure the society gets what they need and permissible in Islam, and also fulfill the basic needs of the human being and the society. So in terms of decision making, and because economic theory is about decision making. So in terms of decision making, we have to strive to satisfy the society's needs by all the means that we have. So economic decisions, therefore, have to be made by taking into account its implication to other human beings, other countries, environment, animal, and all other creation of Allah. So Islam does acknowledge human needs and desires. So what emphasized, however, is the way and means of achieving them. It must be within defined limits of Islamic rules with the intention of attaining Allah's blessing. So therefore, decision-making in utilizing resources, therefore, must intend to establish harmony between moral and material needs. Okay, we acknowledge there's a material needs, but they also, we have to take into account of the moral needs as well. So when we are balancing this, then inshallah, the world will be a wonderful place to live, and the resources will be utilized the best manner, and societies will be getting what they want most, and their welfare will be maximized. I think this is my last slide. Oh, there's another slide. Okay, I just finished this slide. So therefore, Islam calls for maximum exploitation of economic resources, and as a consequence, there should be minimum wastage. This is consistent with the conventional economic theory that we have discussed earlier. So the requirement for efficient allocation of resources is clearly stated in the Quran and also Hadith, where in Surah An-Nisa, verse 5, just mentioned that, and do not hand over the possession to those weak of understanding your economic resources, which Allah has made a means of support for you, but feed and clothe them therewith, and speak to them words of kindness. And Hadith by Muslim mentioned that every landlord should farm his land, but if he cannot do that, he should let his brother farm it. So obviously, people who are good at certain things must be given the responsibility and opportunity to do it, and there shouldn't be any exploitation in the resources available, and the resources must be utilized in the best manner and efficient manner. Okay, so it is important to note that the resources must be allocated to produce and consume goods and services that are permitted by Sharia. Okay, so that will be 35 minutes. I think so I end here. Zara, are you there?
Yes, bro.
Okay, so my plan is, I don't know, I leave it to you, whether you want, we have 10 minutes, whether open for, okay, I have to stop sharing, whether we open for question and answer, or I start another lecture. And then we have,
maybe we can start another lecture if you're okay.
Okay,
Maybe you can
okay.
take a few minutes break if you would like to, and then we only open for Q&A at the end of your second lecture.
I think I don't need break. Inshallah, I will be able to cover another lecture. And then we have question and answer. Inshallah, we have about 10 minutes or so to have question and answer. I think that's better. We can collect the questions. Thank you, Zara.
All right.
Okay. All right. So market from Islamic perspective. So this is very important. Okay. Basically, what we have discussed in the first lecture just now, about the utilization of resources, we can see how it is functions in the market. Okay. Anywhere we go, how remote the area is, somehow human beings, when they interact, especially in meeting their needs, somehow there will be some kind of transaction taking place. It may not be in a market that we understand today, but whenever there's a transaction between human beings, that is a market basically. All right. So a market, according to Al-Ghazali, evolved due to natural forces. It is part of natural order of things, because when we want something, we will go and search for it. So it's a natural thing because we are in need of material things. And as such, it is an expression of self-motivated human desires to voluntarily satisfy our mutual economic needs. Okay, so market therefore is an actual place where buyers and sellers engage either face to face. Today we have online, marketing, online purchasing, and so on. So anyway, it is bargaining in whether you like it or not. Even in Shopee or Lazada, we will be looking for where the prices are the cheapest, what are the rating and all that. That's basically bargaining. Yeah. So whether it's done online or whether it's done face to face, whenever there's an interaction between buyers and sellers in exchanging goods and services, we call that as market. So basically, market is a place where there's a mechanism by which buyers and sellers can determine price. So when they exchange goods and services, price is determined. So price is very important, as I will be discussing the next slide. So what market does is it's constantly solving the questions, economic, what we call as economic questions in economy. What are the questions? Whenever we want to make economic decision, there are three questions that we always ask. What I want to buy or what I want to produce, and how I'm going to do it, and for whom I'm doing this. So these are the three key economic questions that everybody has. Even the government have to ask this question. They have these resources, what I want to do with it, how I'm going to do with it, and for whom. So these are the three economic questions. So basically, market is solving these three economic questions constantly. So the market forces will balance these, the market activities. Okay, market forces will basically balance what is needed in the economy. And markets are finding an equilibrium of supply and demand. Okay, so in the market, we have consumers. Consumers represent demand. We have producers or sellers, they represent supply. So in the market, we have sellers and buyers, demand and supply. Okay. So in Islam, market is an important area, is an important platform. That is where the transaction important transactions are taking place to achieve to basically satisfy human needs. And this transaction must be done in honest way and trustworthy way. A market that functions effectively is where people have trust, confidence. So that can only achieve when there's honesty and trustworthiness. Okay, and this is important in Islam. And without this, a market will fail. When there's no moral values, market, how efficient it is also, it will be breaking down. You'll have market failures. So in Islam, when we do transaction, there should be mutual consent. Mutual consent is a necessary condition for acceptable transactions. buyers and sellers must willfully consider the interests of one another and the pursuit to achieve personal interest. This is also another important characteristics of a successful and efficient market. So whenever we are buying or selling, it has to take into account of what is the impact of our action. Okay, we want to achieve our personal interests, but what would be the impact on others? When this is always considered, inshallah, the market will be the best, will be functioning in a very, balanced and efficient manner. So trading must also satisfy, therefore, trading must satisfy three interrelated conditions. If you look at conventional theory, they just look into personal benefits, demand and supply. Consumers go to the market because they want to satisfy their own satisfaction. Producers, they are selling, or sellers, they are selling the products because they want to maximize their profit. So that's personal benefits. There's nothing wrong with that. But what it is important as well to make sure the market functions well is what is the external benefits? What are the impact of our transaction, social benefits? The social benefit is very important to be taken into account. And in Islam, this has been emphasized. Another important component of a successful market is fairness. When the price, as a consumers, we also have to be fair to the seller, and the seller also has to be fair to the consumer. So when fairness is there in the market, then inshallah the market will be functioning well. So in terms of profit making is allowed, but should reflect a compassionate and benevolent nature. Market operated with compassion and benevolence will have different results than the one driven by profit and self-satisfaction. So from conventional perspective, the market is driven by profit maximization. That is okay, but what is also important is the sellers must also have compassion and benevolence when they're setting the price. Fairness, fair pricing is very important in Islam, so that there's no exploitation. So therefore, the welfare of the consumers, welfare of the society will be taken into account in any decision, will be achieved. So a profit-driven trading encourages unhealthy competition. What we see today in our real life partly is because of this basic attitude of profit-driven activities. There can be envy and enmity. Hence, in an Islamic setting, the ultimate goal is engaging in any transactions to achieve the blessings of Allah. And also, when we talk about profit, not only profit in this world to live in this world, but also in what we're going to gain in the hereafter. Price is very important in market. Okay, in Islam we talk about fair pricing. Yeah? But anyway, when there's a demand and supply, a price will be set. So if the market were to operate freely without any external interference, price plays an important role in coordinating the market mechanism. Okay, in Islam, freedom of trade and operation of market forces are highly encouraged, and market is allowed to set prices. So prices basically give signals to producers and consumers. Now, consumers, when they want to buy more, for example, like Eid, you want to buy, let's say, mutton, you finally find that the mutton price is going up because Eid is nearing, or that was the Eid season. So the prices of, I'm using bus as service here, but I'm changing, let's say use mutton, for example. So when the price is high, the producers will know, oh, okay, so there are more people going to buy the meat, mutton, so I better go and get supply for this. So the price will give signal to the suppliers to go, and because for producers, they are looking for profit. They want to sell more to get more money, more profit. So whenever price is high, they're very happy. So they're going to get more supply. So even though demand has gone up because of Eid, But because suppliers want to make profit, they see the price is high during the season, they're going to get more supply. So the market will be balanced, even though the equilibrium price will be high, but consumers, when they go to market, they get what they want. What we don't want is the market to have shortages, the market to have overstocks, for example, or surplus. So we will go to market to buy something, we must get what we want. We come back with whatever we want to buy, and that will basically means our social well-being, our economic well-being is already taken care of by the market. Okay, so if you go to the market, you want to buy mutton, they say, okay, finish. You want to buy oil, petroleum, finish. So it means the market is not functioning well. It's not the demand, there's something wrong with the demand and supply. Market is not effective, efficient. Okay, so when consumers go, they must be able to go to the market to buy something, they must be getting. Similarly for producers, okay? So producers, when they bring something to sell, they should be able to sell everything. If there's a surplus, then it means they should do something to get rid of this surplus. Okay, when commodity become overstocked, what they should do? They reduce the price. That's why in some seasons, for example, fruits are very cheap because there's so much of supply. And that's a fruit season for, let's say, mango. Okay, there's so much mango in the market. So if they keep on selling at high price during the normal season, the mangoes will not be sold because there's so much mangoes available. So they can go and get somewhere, which is consumers can go somewhere else to get cheaper prices. So when there's unsold products in the market, surplus in economics, we call it, what the producer should do is to reduce the price. So by reducing the price, what happened? As a consumer, I'm happy, the price is cheap, so I buy more. So consumers will demand more. And when consumers buy more, whatever surplus that available in the market will start to decline. Okay, so slowly there will be equilibrium, there will be balance. So consumers are getting what, at a cheaper price, they buy a lot more. Sellers are able to sell more too. So basically the market equilibrium is restored. There's no surplus. So this is how when prices play its role in as a balanced wheel in the market. Okay, prices are the balanced wheel in the market mechanism. It's basically it will balance the markets to make sure the market is always in equilibrium. See, what is true for the market for the consumer good is also true for the factors of production, such as land, capital, and labor. Okay, so price play an important role. Therefore, in Islam also, price is the level of price that is put in the market is actually emphasized. It should be fair price, and also how the price interference are. I will discuss that later, whether whether the government or the authority can actually intervene in the price or not. So the key is in Islam, price should be set by the market freely without much interference unless it is necessary. Okay, so price plays an important role in market mechanism. Okay, so the next slide is basically to show, this is a lot of graphs. In economics, we have to have numbers and graphs, but I minimize this and make it the simplest possible way. I try to make it in a very simple way. So when we talk about market equilibrium in economic theory, basically it means demand equal to supply. That's what we mean by market equilibrium. Okay. Of course, in real life, I think we all have gone to market, and when we see a price tags in the supermarket or in the market or in the roadside, everywhere, we see a price tag. When you look at it, you say, oh, okay. When you decide to buy, let's say you want to buy chicken, and per kilo is 10 ringgit. Okay, I'm using Malaysian currency, 10 ringgit. And you think it's a fair price because that is the market price. So you buy it. But if it is 20 ringgit per kilo, in another market, will you buy it? You will not buy it. You see, oh, this is not the market price. This is too high. So what is the price that you think is okay? When you feel the price is okay, it means that is the equilibrium price in the market. It's acceptable price in the market. And we call that as equilibrium price. How this price is determined? This price is determined by demand and supply. What is demand? Basically, demand in economics basically means we have level of prices. Usually, these figures that you see is, of course, is hypothetical numbers, but it is actually through survey and research. It's not just, the number is just put for the sake of putting it. Research are being done. So many research has been done. That's why we have law of demand. The law of demand is actually is determined after extensive research on consumers' behavior, on buying some products or goods or services. So what the law of demand says is that whenever price is high, consumers will buy less. I mean, that's basically obvious. We all understand as laymen, we know that when things are cheap, when things are expensive, we buy less. When things are cheap, we buy more. So there is a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. Okay, so you see this gray line in the graph. To put it simply, of course, there's an explanation why there's a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded, but I'm not going to go into that. But basically, what we easily can understand is that there is a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. What is negative relationship? What does that mean? It means that whenever the relationship between two, in this, we have two variables. What are the variables? Price, quantity demanded. When the relationship between, theory is about relationship, and in economic theory, when we talk about relationship, okay, it's always two variables. We cannot have too many. That's why we have assumptions in theory. So in this law of demand, you only have two variables, price, quantity demanded for one product. If it is shoes, price of shoes, quantity demanded for shoes. If it is apple, price of apple, quantity demanded for apple. So if the price of apple go up, quantity demanded go down. Okay. If price of apple go down, quantity demanded go up. You see the arrow is, my hand is showing a different direction. So when you have different direction like this, it means it have negative relationship. So when you have negative relationship, you see the graph is downward sloping, showing that when the price is high, quantity is low. When price is low, sorry, this $1, $1, quantity is high. $5, quantity is low. So the graph is downward sloping. On the right-hand side, we have data on quantity supply. S here means supply, D here means demand. Sorry for the short forms. So here, again, through the survey and research, okay, interviews or whatever, so we find that we get data on price and quantity supplied. Let's say for shoes. Now, we can see from here, from this data, that at different prices, different quantities are supplied. Okay, so as a producer or seller, the motivation they have is to maximize profit. This is from conventional perspective. So when they find that price is high, they are happy, they make more money, so they supply more. If the price is low at $1, they are not happy, so they sell more. I mean, I'm putting in a very simple way. So basically, price is revenue. Price is motivation for producers. When price is high, supply more, price is low, supply less. Simple as that. So you see supply curve, the red line here, S is supply curve, D is demand curve. So it is upward sloping. Upward sloping means the relationship is positive. Price is high, quantity is high. Price is low, quantity is low. Okay, so you see the direction is positive. So when you have positive relationship, supply curve is upward sloping. So we have supply curve, demand curve at different prices. So when they intersect in this point, so you have equilibrium price. So here you see, I put a red circle, price $3, P is price, $3. Quantity demanded is 7,000, or in this case is corn. I'm using all kind of product. I'm sorry, different products I'm using here is actually corn. I used shoes just now. Price is $3, quantity is 7,000. This is for demand. Supply $3 and 7,000. You see, the number is same, 3 and 3 for supply and demand. Quantity is also the same. So when they intersect, that's what it means. At the market price that consumers and producers are willing to sell and buy. Okay, there's equilibrium. At $3, and the quantity will be 7,000. What 7,000 means? If the sellers are selling $7,000, consumers come and buy all the 7,000 bushels of corn, and the market has no any balance available. So producers are happy because whatever corn they bring into the market are all sold. Consumers are also happy because they come to the market, they get whatever corn they want for that day or for that week. All sold, halas, okay? So that's what we mean by equilibrium. Equilibrium here is you have equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity, all right? These are demand is a supply. Now, when there is equilibrium in the market, it means the resources are allocated efficiently. How? Because at $3, what it means is that, okay, there is productive efficiency. $3, productive efficiency. What does that mean? You remember productive efficiency means what? Productive efficiency means producing goods and services at the lowest cost possible. So it means consumers are getting at $3 per bushel of corn. That is the lowest price they can get in the market, the best price. Okay, the cost is the lowest for producers. Okay, so consumers are getting the lowest price. And this 7,000 here, this 7,000 means consumers are getting what they are looking for. Their social well-being is taken care of. Okay, so whatever they want, in this case is corn, they already got what they want. There's allocative efficiency. This is the optimal quantity. There is no case where they go to the market, they want to buy corn, there's no corn. It's not such thing when there's equilibrium. So when the market is in equilibrium, there's allocative efficiency. Society gets what they want most. If they want corn, they get what they want. So in that sense, what I'm trying to say here is that there are three important points here. When market is in equilibrium, there's equilibrium quantity, equilibrium price, that is $3. There's equilibrium quantity, $7,000. And when market is in equilibrium, resources are allocated efficiently. You see the word is efficient. So market equilibrium also means efficiency. What kind of efficiency? Allocative efficiency. Okay, and also productive efficiency. All right, so market is in, that is the importance of market. So market forces functions, price is determined, at the same time resources are allocated efficiently. All right. Now, this one I thought I want to bring in the discussion here. It looks a bit crowded, but it's not difficult. Now, this one I want to show. Sometimes certain products, the market price is not, I cannot say it's not fair, but it is causing trouble. It is not a price that either consumer or producers deem right. Let's say, for example, petroleum. When there's a Ukraine war, a Ukraine-Russia war, what happened to the oil price, petroleum price? Petroleum price went very, very high. If you look at market price in Malaysian ringgit, I'm looking from, I can easily use Malaysian ringgit as a, I mean, for me, that's my comfortable, because I'm going to bring the market intervention, government intervention here. Okay, the market price for petroleum, let's say, is 6 ringgit per liter. In market, world market, 6 ringgit. But that is too high. Even though it's the equilibrium price, but it's too high. when oil price is high, everything becomes expensive. Goods and services, costs of production will be very high. And therefore, as a consumer, we have to pay very, very high price for goods and services. And that can cause inflation. And then later, this is macroeconomics over here, inflation, recession, these are all macroeconomics that later Dr. Nizam will be explaining, giving you the introduction. So it can cause negative impact on the economy. So for that, in this case, the equilibrium price may not be the right price. Therefore, this justifies government's intervention. Okay, right. There are two types of prices. One is price floor, the other one is price ceiling. So let me discuss on price ceiling first, because I started using the example of petroleum just now. Let's say, as I told you just now, the market price, just now petroleum, the real world, 6 ringgit, right? But if I were to use this graph as an example, let's say the market price is $3. In this case is corn. If I use petroleum, let's say it's $3 per US dollars, US dollars $3 per liter. I'm not using corn as example, I'm using petroleum so that you can see the rationale of it. Let's say $3 per liter is very expensive. And government feel that with this $3, it can cause inflation and recession, and consumers will face hardship. Okay, so what government can do? Government set a price below the market equilibrium price. In this case is $2. So therefore it's called as price ceiling. Why price ceiling? Even though it's below the demand equilibrium price. Ceiling because the price cannot go beyond 2. It has to be below 2. Above 2 is illegal. Government can take action. Okay, that's why it's called price ceiling. So $2, all right? So when there's a price ceiling, okay, according to the economic theory, when government set, okay, before that, for price ceiling, we can see the objective. Objective is to assist consumers, all right? Consumers, not producers, consumers. What's the impact? The impact is, according to the economy, it can cause shortages. Why shortages? Because at price $2, okay, price $2, okay, you see the yellow circle here, $2, this is supply, $2, the supply, this I'm using petroleum, let's say 4,000 liters, $2, 4,000 liters supply. Demand, when price is low, as a consumer, you are happy, right? You buy more, so 11,000. Demand is 11,000. Supply is 4,000. Okay, so supply is less than demand. In economics, the real term is quantity demanded and quantity supply. So there will be shortage. See the graph here, $2, this is supply, and this is demand. The graph is not correct because I took from the textbook, so it's a bit doesn't reflect the real number. So this is 4,000. Supposed to be this one, supposed to be 11,000. Okay, so shortage is how much? Shortage is 7,000 liters of petroleum. Okay, there will be shortage. But in real world, in Malaysia, it's common. We have this price ceiling for petroleum. Price is lower than the world market price. Is much, much lower because we are oil producing country. We don't see shortage because government solved this problem by importing. This one, in the graph, you'll find that there's a shortage, but in the real world, government can solve this problem of shortage by importing or producing more. Okay, therefore there's no shortage. But based on theory, there will be shortage. Okay, right. I go down to price floor. Now, price floor is where the government intervene in the market and set the price above the market price. Okay, and we call that price floor because $4 is the minimum price. Anything higher than 4 is okay, below illegal. You must sell at above 4. Usually this is for the farm products, fish related products, and fishermen, basically to help government and fishermen and farmers. Okay. What is the implication? At $4, you see the red circle, demand 4,000, supply 10,000, supply more than demand. When supply more than demand, we call this as surplus, overstock. Okay. This is a common practice, not so much in developing countries, but it is a common policy implemented in developed countries, especially in Europe and US for agricultural products. Okay. In Malaysia, we do this for fishermen, to help the fishermen, but not so much. But it's very rampant in developed countries to assist the farmers because they have certain policies to help the farmers. The farmers are very rich in developed countries. So, okay, I don't want to go into that so much. It can be another lecture on agricultural policies, international agricultural policy. But anyway, in Europe and US, because of this price floor for agricultural products, what happened? There's a surplus. When there's a surplus, they have to get rid of the surplus. There's so much products. These are all agricultural products like egg, butter, milk, and wheat, and sugar, all kind of stuff. So much of surplus. What they do with it? There are two policies. One is export the products. Number two, create industries that use these products. For example, if there's a surplus of milk, then they should encourage industries using milk like butter, cheese, and so on, that uses milk, yogurt, and that kind of stuff. If it's wheat, then it has to be bakeries and bread and that kind of stuff. Okay, so basically create industries domestically, and to support these industries, give divert this surplus into these industries. Export also is being done, but you must remember in developed countries, costs of production for agricultural product is very high. As a result, when the government want to get rid of this surplus by exporting, what they do? They give subsidy, export subsidy. And that's why in the world today, the agricultural product, if you look at the price trend in the international market, it is downward trending. Okay, so agriculture product price is downward trending. What does that mean? It means there's a lot of dumping of agriculture product by the developed countries in the developing countries. As a result, our farmers are facing problem in selling their own products. Our market is swarmed by products from developed countries. So this is one of the important issues in World Trade Organization that has been very sticky and very sensitive and still disputed until today. Okay, even though there are solutions, quote unquote solutions have been done under the agreement on agriculture, but still it's not sufficient to solve the problem. Okay, so anyway, coming back to this one, what we can see here is government do intervene in the market, basically intervene to make sure to assist, they don't intervene for their own purpose, but basically to assist either consumers or producers. Now, the question is, can prices be set in Islam? Okay. Basically, Islamic economy is basically encourages free market. Even Prophet, he limited interference in the market, especially if the action could affect public interest. When Prophet was asked to intervene in setting prices in the market, he said, "I will not set such precedents. Let the people carry on their activities and benefit mutually." Okay. Nevertheless, government's intervention in the market is justified in exceptional cases to protect public interests, but must make sure the price is a just price. So fixation of price by merchants not by the government, by merchants, with the objective of making huge profit is prohibited. There were cases during Prophet time where a few merchants went outside the city. They were, products are coming from outside the cities into the market in the city. So these few merchants purchase all these products. Objective is they buy at a low price. So when products go into the market, there will be sort of shortage, So when these merchants come in and they sell at a high price. They make huge profit. So this kind of price fixation is condemned by Islam because it causes harm and hardship to the society. So that's in terms of fixing price. I like to discuss a little bit on the market failure because this is also related to the market. This particular topic will be discussed in more detail by Dr. Husna later in one of the lectures. Her specialization is on environmental economics, so she will go detail on it. But I just go on surface because I want to relate to the discussion on market. Now, when we say market failure, it means that there's some kind, the market, the transaction that's happening in the market is causing harm to the third party, or there are external benefits that are created, but the person who create that benefit are not getting reward for that. So therefore it's called externalities. There's an external party, yeah? So that's why it's called externalities, where the benefits or cost of market activities are borne by some third party that is external to the market transaction, where these externalities are passed to someone other than the immediate buyer or seller. There are two types of externalities, positive. One is, there are two types of externalities. Number one, positive externalities or spillover benefits. This can be caused by consumers or producers, or negative externalities or spillover costs that can be caused by consumers or producers. So in Islam, any market transaction that could harm a third party or the society is condemned. And it is seen as a morality failure because, especially the negative externalities, when it harms a third party, then it means there's something wrong with the morality of the people that causes this. If a product or service has positive externalities to the society, then this is encouraged and should be provided and made available, especially in this case, justifies government intervention or government provision of the product. Like for example, like hospitals, okay, it has positive externalities. But if you expect the market to provide hospitals at a lower price, at very low price, or even free, that will never happen unless there are some NGOs, even that is not enough. So therefore, when there is a need for this, government should intervene, either by giving subsidy or even providing government, hospitals for free. So in Islamic economic system, ethics and amanah is very important, especially in terms of utilization of resources. And market actors must constantly contemplate the existence of Allah in all the daily activities and be conscious about the impact of the activities on others. So whenever we are doing something, it's not just for our own purpose, but we must remember there will be impact on others. Okay, so public interest is very important concept in Islam. I just want to show this, example. I always tell my students, imagine this. Okay, you have a neighbor. All right, this is by consumers. One neighbor plants, flowers and clean the neighbor's area, even their own house, and making place beautiful. Not only their house but also neighbor's house. Around the surrounding, they plant flowers and trees and so on. Okay, so that's one kind of person. And then you have another neighbor who throws away rubbish, and we have cats and dogs and monkeys and whatever animals in their house, so dirty and messed up, throw the rubbish everywhere. So you compare these two. Okay, so what is the impact on others. So the first example is the case of positive externalities created by consumers. Okay, how others are benefiting from this. They don't have to pay. They have no cost, nothing. But when they come out from their house, they see beautiful things around them. So that's positive externalities created by consumers. On the other hand, the second example that I've mentioned is negative externalities. You know, as a neighbor, you will have a miserable life, smelly, dirty, mosquitoes and rats and all kind of animals coming to your house and the surrounding area, causing trouble, causing uneasiness and so on. So that's negative externalities produced by consumers, and it's not producers. Both are in the case of consumers. This one, I just want to show you example. This happens around us, especially in developing countries. Okay, where this is why we say it's a morality failure when this external costs created by producers, they want to reduce their costs, so therefore they transfer some of the cost to the society by their activities. So all these are examples of environmental pollution, environmental impact that caused by producers. Just want to show you an example so you can get an idea. Okay, just don't worry about the graph. Okay, what I want to show is whenever there is a negative externality by consumer, let's say someone who smokes, okay, cigarette is sold in the market. It's a product. Okay, it's a product in the market. The society knows cigarette have negative impact on health. All right, so it will affect our well-being. Our well-being will be reduced by someone else's action. So if you look at this graph, you have demand and supply. So the market demand, it means if the government don't intervene, cigarette is cheap, is available everywhere. The green demand and supply curve, this green one, blue demand, point A, is where the consumption is, the normal when there's a free market. So we say just now, market should be free. So when you allow a cigarette market to be free without any intervention by the government, what happened? There will be consumption of Q1. Q1 is, you can see the consumption is, let's say, this is 0. 0 to Q1 is the amount of consumption. And it's not good. Many people are smoking around you because it's very cheap. It's available. There's no, government ruling that you cannot smoke in public area. So everybody's smoking. It's cheap. Children are also smoking. Imagine the environment. But since this product has impact on the consumer, negative impact, government can intervene, and most government intervene by imposing tax, okay, excise tax I mentioned earlier, and putting condition you cannot smoke in public area. If you smoke, there is a fine, okay, things like that. So when that kind of imposition that kind of policies are imposed, what happened is the demand will reduce because now the price of cigarette is high. It's difficult to smoke everywhere. There's awareness and things like that. So you see the red line is where the demand declined because of government intervention, government policies. Okay, so what the optimal amount? I mean, there will be people smoking anyway, whether secretly or not. Market sometimes even not sold in the market, they can get it somewhere. So let's say Q2 is what the society thinks the quantity is okay. You smoke, but on your own, not in public area, and it's very expensive. Only those who are really crazy about smoking will take it, and so on. So let's say Q2 is the optimal amount. So Q1 is if there's a free market. So the difference between Q1 and Q2 is what we call as overconsumption. So this is one example that to show that sometimes free market is not an optimal one. There should be some intervention by the government to regulate the market. Okay, not in all cases the market can be allowed to function freely. Okay, one example. Another example is related to COVID vaccine. Okay, we know that many African countries, many poor, other Asian poor countries, and also in Latin America to some extent, they did not get sufficient supply of vaccine, COVID vaccine. Why is that? The reason is because this vaccine is protected by intellectual property. This patented, owned by multinationals, certain multinationals. Now, there is discussion in WHO and WTO to allow countries to produce. Basically, the patent owners can sort of give license to local producers to produce. And this is called as voluntary licensing. But the patent owners were reluctant to give. They give only to some countries, not only Korea, Thailand, a few examples of countries that have got this license to produce. But it's not sufficient, especially in Africa. So many countries did not get. So what happened is this, when this happened, when there's, without government intervention, if you allow the market to function, the amount produced is Q1. You see here, Q1. Okay, if you allow only the patent owners to produce, it's only Q1. It's not sufficient. What the market want is QE. Okay, this graph is actually not the perfect one, but just I think you can sort of think about it. There's a shortage. Q1 is where the market is producing, because when there's a patent, there's a monopoly. What monopoly wants is high price. Okay, they want to make the maximum profits possible. So this is unethical, because they are not looking at the public interest, social interest. What is the social well-being of the people by having the vaccine at the lowest price and sufficient quantity? There's a shortage in vaccine market. Okay, those who have money have actually bought so much and kept it, and those who are slow and don't have much money don't get it. So there's a shortage. So therefore, without the government intervention, what is government intervention? In this case, what government could have done is by issuing compulsory licensing. I think in this COVID case they didn't do it. They didn't get the time to do it, and there are not many local producers, domestic producers have the capacity and capability to produce vaccine. They don't have the technology. Therefore, it is a bit slow. Only few countries got the license. That's voluntary licensing, not compulsory licensing. I hope I'm not confusing you. Compulsory licensing is license that are issued by the government without the consent of the patent owner. Voluntary licensing is where the government issue license with the consent of the owner. So there are many cases where the patent owner don't allow, for example, like AIDS medicine. There we have a compulsory licensing. Many governments have actually issued compulsory license, including Malaysia. We have once issued compulsory licensing. But in the case of COVID, because it's new, they were talking about voluntary licensing, allowing countries to produce. That's one part of it. Another part is we don't have the capacity. So what the society wants is QE, market equilibrium, QE. But what the market is actually producing is Q1. So there is a shortage. So I don't want to go into the economic discussion of efficiency and all that, but little bit, just passing like that. You see the purple triangle? This purple triangle shows inefficiency. You remember just now I mentioned efficiency and so on. So if the people get what they want, there's a allocative efficiency, optimal amount, QE. If the vaccine is produced, QE, everybody gets. Any countries, any human being needs vaccine, all get it, there is QE, market is in equilibrium. But what is being produced by the market is Q1. So there is a under production, under allocation of resources. So there is inefficiency, or we call it efficiency loss. Another word for efficiency loss is dead weight loss. Okay, so what I'm trying to show here is that sometimes in this case also, vaccine has positive externalities. It is good for the society, but the market is not producing enough, causing under allocation of resources that led to underproduction. So people who want it don't get it. Okay, so therefore in this case the market is not efficient. All right, which requires government intervention. In the case of vaccine, what is the government intervention? It could be, of course, you know, vaccine is given free. Government have a given subsidy and buy it and given to the people for free. That's number one. Number two, also licensing, producing it. Okay, producing it by either in voluntary licensing or compulsory licensing. I hope I did not. You can ask me later to explain if you are interested more on this. Okay. All right. In summary, when there's a market failure, there is impact on resource allocation. When there's a negative externalities, okay, we call that as spillover cost. The impact on the resource allocation is that there will be overproduction. Just now remember I mentioned about overconsumption of cigarette. When it's produced, production is over, like if it is let's say just now I showed photos of rubbish and waste, toxic waste and all that by industries. There's overproduction. They reduce the cost by polluting the environment, and as a result they can produce more at the lower cost, and therefore there's overproduction because that's not what the society wants. It is beyond what the society wants. They produce a lot more at the expense of the negative impact on the society. There's over allocation of resources. Positive externalities, either consumers or producers, leads to underproduction or underconsumption. And in terms of resource allocation, there will be under allocation of resources. Okay, so I think now it's 10:27. I'm sorry I've taken so much time, but please ask questions. Maybe I can spend some time answering some questions. Sorry, Dr. Zira, I spent too much time, I think, talking.
No, it's okay, Prof. Okay, so thank you so much, Prof, for the interesting lecture, and thank you so much for sharing the knowledge with us today. Just to share with you, while going through some of the comments, we have our friends listening to your lecture from Pakistan, from Cape Town, from Kenya, from Indonesia, from Philippines, and I believe many other countries that I'm not able to mention today. Thank you so much. May Allah also bless your efforts of seeking knowledge with us today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it was indeed a very good lecture where we have been introduced to some basic economic concepts, and also we have been taught how to view this concept from Islamic perspective. I almost forgot my role as a moderator as I continue taking notes as a student. Right, okay, Prof. So maybe we can take a few questions from the floor.
Yes.
Maybe we can allow around 15 minutes Q&A session, then we can go for a break. Right. So the first question is there any difference between achieving equilibrium in conventional and Islamic economics?
Oh, yes. In Islam, equilibrium, okay, what is equilibrium? Equilibrium means where the demand is equal to supply in the market. So basically, it means, if you think logically, equilibrium means as a consumer, I go to market, I get what I want. And the producer, when they go to market, they sell what they want to sell. So there's an equilibrium, there's balance, there's no surplus, there's no shortage. So in Islam also, as I mentioned, Islam encourages free market. There shouldn't be any interference unless it is really necessary to interfere in the market. So there's no difference. Islam encourages free market to function efficiently. So it's the same. Equilibrium in Islam and equilibrium in Islamic, as far as I know, is the same. I think
thank you, Prof.
Yes.
All right. Second question is, please kindly shed more light on the difference between absolute and relative scarcity.
Okay, absolute means I don't have. I mean, scarcity means, okay, you see it clearly in front of your eyes. Absolute means we know for sure in terms of quantity. I mean, I don't have money, for example, it's absolute. I mean, I don't, we have land 10 acres. Okay, that's absolute. Relative means I have 10 acres, but, relative, relative 10 acres, but I can use it, how I'm going to explain it. Relative means it is a relative concept. We have it, but we are not using it. That's macam mana cakap. Absolute means is for sure. It's difficult for me to explain. I'm trying to think on how to explain it in a very simple way. Absolute means is obvious. It is absolute quantity and amount. But relative is a relative concept. You don't have it, for example, you only have 1 acre, but you can actually produce for 10 acres using technology, using your knowledge, using all the expertise that you have. You can actually produce for the 10 acres. You know what I mean? So it's even though it appears to be scarce, but by using the the technology that you have, the knowledge you have, you can actually produce more. So scarcity is actually a relative concept. It's not absolute in the sense. I hope it's clear. It's a relative concept.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Next is Islam defines the transaction is to achieve the blessings of Allah and profit in the hereafter. How to determine the fair profit that reflect a compassionate and benevolent nature?
When we are doing business, we know for sure what is the right price, what is the fair price for the product. If you are involved in business, you will know that when you are charging so much and people have difficulty to pay, then it's not fair. Overpricing, for example, there's a shortage. Oh, I'm going to make big profit out of it. You charge very high price. So then it is unjust to people. And compassionate benevolence means sometimes when my family all are in business. There are some people who come to our shop that we give free, or sometimes we give cheap. Some people don't have enough cash, but they want the item. You give, never mind. You don't have to pay, or you can pay later, or you can pay installment. So you have this compassion, to make sure that even those who cannot afford can actually gain from your business. So it's not just, business is not just to make money. So when you say just, it's very relative again. It depends on circumstances. But when we are benevolent and we have compassion in our heart, and we want to achieve the blessing of Allah, we'll always make sure in any activities that we do, we are doing it for the acceptance of Allah. So it's not just to make money. Money is just one of the objective, but profit and money shouldn't be the priority in our business activities. So compassion is important. Sometimes we give free, sometimes cheap. I remember recently when oil. My nephew was telling, for example, I just give you an example. He has a provision shop in a Malay village, where most of the people there are retirees. So I think Zara and Malaysians, I think we all know we have shortage of oil palm because of Indonesia imposed export restrictions on oil palm. And as a result, even though we are oil palm producing country, we are dependent on Indonesia because our plantation are actually in Indonesia. So when these resources are not coming, so there's a shortage. So as you know, cooking oil price went up quite a lot, by 10 ringgit or something. Went up a lot. Subsidy has been taken out. So the price went up a lot. So my nephew has a lot of stocks in his shop. Okay, he knows the price is going to go up. So when old people comes, he sell at a old price. Let's say last time was 20 ringgit. Now with the new price is 33 ringgit. Okay, that's how much the price have gone up. So he sold at 20 ringgit for all the retirees. So we said, then his mother was saying, oh, this much, like this, you will lose money. He said, no, actually, I don't lose money because I bought it at low price, at old price, not the new price. So that's compassion. So you see the person who have less money, retirees, you don't sell them at a high price because you know you got this item at the low price. So you don't want to sell at a new price. Unless you get it at a high price, then you have to sell at a high price. That's compassion. So I think that's very important when we do business, that we have that compassion and benevolence. And only then we can get blessings from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.
All right, thank you, Prof. I'll go to one more from Zoom, and then maybe I can take some from YouTube. Okay, so could you give a more and a simple and specified example of positive and negative externalities?
I thought I have given you quite clear. Okay, positive externalities, think like this. Anything we do, is there an impact on others? Consumers, for example, when I smoke, let's say I smoke and I smoke in front of everybody, children, old people, young people, women, pregnant women, everybody, I smoke, I don't care. So that's negative externalities, okay, because my action is having impact on others in terms of health. That's positive. Negative externalities in terms of consumption. In terms of positive externality consumption, I showed you the example of the person planting flowers and cleaning. Like, for example, yesterday, our community here, we cleaned the whole area in our residence area. So that's positive externality because we are, cleaning up for other. We put our effort, but other people are, everybody benefits in the society. So that's positive externalities. Negative externality as a consumer, I throw rubbish. Like in school, we were cleaning in front of school yesterday, we got 8 big garbage bag, because school kids, when they come out from the school, they don't have the ethics, not like Japanese. In Malaysia, they just throw rubbish in front of the school, So we, when I walk in front of the school, I get like, oh my God, why so dirty? And then we have dengue, dengue is an illness here in Malaysia because of all this rubbish being thrown freely like that. So that's negative externality, when your action causes problem to others. Producers, you can see all the environmental impact, how the industries are just, doing all kind of stuff, which is throwing rubbish and throwing toxic waste. That's negative. Positive, by industries, maybe I didn't, something that I did not cover. Positive by industry, for example, if I have a bus company, so I have bus drivers. And I am a good employer. I train them, I send them for classes, I teach them the rules and regulation. Basically, my objective is to create bus drivers who follows the rules, who are very good, who are compassionate, who take care of the passengers, etc., etc. So, and then this bus driver resign from my company and go to another company. So this, basically, I am creating a positive externalities to other companies and also to the society, because we have good bus drivers and other companies also benefit. They don't have to pay for training. This guy already, the driver is already trained. So that's positive externality by producer as an example. I hope that's clear.
Perhaps it can be a homework to the participant. You can go out from your house now and try to determine whether your neighbor producing positive or negative externalities.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm taking one from our YouTube. Please give more explanation on Q1 and QE. I believe this is from your graph.
Q1, I think this is the last graph that I have given about the COVID vaccine. QE is the market equilibrium. It means what the society wants. How much, what is the quantity of vaccine needed by the world? Okay. But that's QE, equilibrium quantity. What people want, what the producers in a normal circumstances can actually produce and sell. Okay, so demand and supply is equilibrium at QE. But these monopolists, multinational companies, they control the production. They limit the production. You see, this is one of the character of monopolists. When they control the market, you remember vaccine is actually a monopoly. So what they, even though it's oligopoly, but we call that monopoly, what they do is to charge high price, they reduce production. They give all kind of excuse lah. They reduce production. That's Q1. So they produce less than what the market need, what the market equilibrium is actually is. Remember, QE is also in terms of supply. They can actually produce that quantity, but they purposely limit the production so that they control the market and can charge high price. Understand? So QE is the we call it market quantity. QE is Q1 is what the producers are producing. Okay, the quantity is produced by the market. QE is optimal amount. Am I losing the okay? QE is the optimal amount. I hope I make it clear, because you see the problem with the monopolies, they really reduce production, and they can actually produce more, but they are not. Okay, so there's a gap there. So there's underproduction. It's a very pity. I mean, you can start reading on if you're interested in this vaccine issues. It's very interesting. A lot of things are going. I mean, at that time, it's a pity that many countries did not get the vaccine. And people, I cannot say countries. People did not get vaccine.
Right. The next question is quite a country-specific kind of question, but maybe it's good to listen or to hear your opinion. How visible do you think Islamic economic concepts can strive in Africa?
Not only Africa is having problem. Everybody is having problem. I think the main problem, there are two parts to this. I mean, if you look at the economy as a whole, there are three important agents: consumers, producers and sellers, and the government. If these three agents behave and act accordingly, according to the Islamic principle, inshallah, the whole world will be a wonderful place to live. But the problem is, these three, including government, they have greed, self-centered, individualistic, and do not have sufficient, have morality issues. Even throwing rubbish, it has simple thing like that. Is actually related to morality. So in terms of consumption, producers, government, politicians, all this, if you look at it, the reason why the world, I'm not saying Africa, the whole world, including America and Europe, why the whole world is having problem is because the main fundamental problem is the greed, morality issue. The Islamic principles are forgotten by many. I mean, we are talking about Muslims. We ourselves, many of us have forgotten what is the basic fundamentals. When we do, whether there's externalities or not, whether it follows the Islamic principles or not, what are the, what is our life objective in this world? What is, Allah's blessings is not the priority in many of the actions. That's why we have problems. So whether there's any possibility for Africa to become Islamic countries or not, it all depends on the people. Even in Malaysia, we have a lot of issues. I'm sure you have heard our the last week, what are the things that are happening in the country, corruption cases and so on. So all this actually is related to morality. So don't look at politicians, we ourselves as individual. What are the action, when we take any actions, what is the main fundamental objectives of that action? Then inshallah. I think such, okay. What are some things written there? Okay, all right.
All right. So maybe one more question, one last question before we end the Q&A session. Please, can you explain further what do you mean by the term deadweight loss?
Deadweight loss, why is it called deadweight loss? I always tell my students, I wonder what is. I never really looked into what is the cost, why the term is deadweight loss. But I believe deadweight loss is something is lost without any compensation. So basically it means, you remember I mentioned in class topic number 1, when we have resources, the objective of using the resources in satisfying human needs is to use the resources efficiently. So when resources are not used efficiently, for whether because of overproduction or underproduction, for whatever reasons, maybe positive externalities or negative externalities, then what happened is, sorry, something happened here. So what happened is there will be so there will be loss, efficiency loss. Okay, so efficiency loss can happen because of overproduction or underproduction. So that weight loss is efficiency loss. To what in economics we always like to measure. So it's not accurate, but basically give an indication, ideas, how much loss, efficiency loss has taken place because of certain action in the market, whether it's underproduction or overproduction. So there will be efficiency loss when market is not in equilibrium, when there's no optimal output produced. So what are the amount of efficiency that has been lost? So it's basically the economists trying to quantify, they quantify how much efficiency loss because of inefficiency, because of underproduction or overproduction. Okay, it's the same meaning. That weight loss and efficiency loss is the same meaning.
Okay. Of course, we have so many questions coming. I have at least 84 unread messages, so I cannot open all. I tried to divide my attention to other platforms too. I can see there are questions on inflation and things. I will keep that question, inshallah, when we discuss macro perspective. And I also can see some questions regarding elasticity. I think that can also be kept for maybe Prof. Salama's lecture on consumption or production later. Right, so it's 10:46 now in Malaysia. Thank you so much for Rokiah
Thank you very
for
much.
sharing the knowledge. So let us end Rokiah's lecture or session. Let's take a break for like 13 minutes. We'll start again at 11 a.m. in Malaysian time. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you, Dr. Zira, and all the participants. Okay, may Allah bless all of you. Assalamualaikum.
Right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Everyone, welcome back. I think Dr. Nizam is here. Oh, okay. Right. So we'll continue our class with the lecture by Dr. Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Nizam Barom on Introduction to Macroeconomics. But before that, let me briefly introduce who our speaker is today. Okay, so Dr. Nizam is an Associate Professor at our UM. He completed his PhD from Durham University in the area of Islamic Economics and also finance. Among the courses that he has taught at IIUM includes Principle of Microeconomics, Macroeconomics, Foundation of Islamic Economics and Malaysian Economy, and many others, right? Research-wise, he has published numerous journal articles, book chapters, as well as presenting in local and international conferences. One of his articles entitled Conceptualizing a Unified Normative Framework for Social Responsibility in Islamic Economics received Best Journal Articles, Social Sciences Award from MAPIM, Ministry of Education Malaysia. And maybe if I can add one more to his expert profile is that he is officially a climber of Mount Kinabalu, which he did. He successfully climbed in conjunction of our Malaysian Independence Day recently. So without taking so much time, let me pass the floor to Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Nizam to continue with the lecture. Dr. Nizam, I think we cannot hear you. We still cannot hear you, Dr. Nizam.
Assalamualaikum. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, Dr. Nizam.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Sorry for the technical issue just now. Okay. Are you able to hear to see my screen now?
Not yet.
Now we can see it.
We can see it now, Doctor.
Okay. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you everyone for joining our first session in macroeconomics. As you are already familiar with our arrangement, for the next 4 weeks, including today, we will have presentations related to the issue of microeconomics for the first 2 sessions. And after the break, we will have another 2 sessions on macroeconomics. This will last until week 8 of this online course. Yeah. So my role today is to introduce some of the important areas of macroeconomics that we will cover throughout the 4 weeks, from week 5 to week 8. So these are the main discussions that I will share with you today. First of all, we will look at the difference between microeconomics, the one that you have covered earlier in the morning, and also macroeconomics that we will discuss now. Yeah? And then I will also share some of the topics that will be presented later for the next 4 weeks, yeah, of our discussion, highlighting some of the macroeconomic goals, looking at the overall macroeconomy in terms of its components, and also the types of markets available in the economy. And in order to understand the operation of the whole economy, it will be very useful to use the circular flow of income and expenditure model to highlight the different interactions between the components and actors in the macroeconomy. And then one of the important aspects of macroeconomic management is the stabilization policies. So I will introduce what are some of the available stabilization policies that can be used in managing the macroeconomy. And of course, later in the upcoming weeks, you will be presented in greater detail on each of these topics. And then one of the interesting component of an Islamic economy or an Islamic economic system is the importance of the third sector. So we should not be only looking at transactions or interactions happening in markets, but also the things which are happening beyond markets, where things are not measured in terms of its monetary value. For example, voluntary activities are not paid. Therefore, in the computation of GDP, it will not be counted because there's no payment involved. However, these kind of activities are considered very important in an Islamic economic system, and therefore we want to highlight this in our presentation today. And after we incorporated the role of the third sector, we will then identify the whole 4 sources of economic well-being that are there, that are available in an Islamic economic system. And then, of course, the ultimate aim of an Islamic economic system is to realize socio-economic justice and overall human well-being, which we will touch a little bit at the end if we still have the time. Yeah? Okay. So what is macroeconomics? So I'm sure that you have been introduced to microeconomics earlier in the morning. Yeah? So microeconomic deals with specific economic units, such as individual consumer, individual producer, the decisions made by specific firms in a specific industry. However, when we talk about the macroeconomic aspect, we are looking at the economy as a whole, in aggregate terms. For example, we look at areas of total output in terms of GDP, GNP, and so on, in terms of total income in the economy, in terms of total employment. So everything is at the aggregate level. So certain issue in economy, for example, price level, can be discussed at both micro and macro level. For example, if we are talking about the price of crude oil in the global oil market, so that represents microeconomics because it deals with a specific product in a specific market. Or if you are talking about the productivity of Microsoft workers, so that is still a microeconomic issue because it is talking about the things happening within a certain firm, or how many workers that Apple factory in China, for example, would want to employ in order to maximize profit. So that is still within the context of microeconomics. However, in terms of microeconomics, we will still be talking about price level, but not the price of specific product in a specific market or industry. We are talking about the price level for all goods and services in the economy. If the general price level increase, we call it inflation. Yeah. If there is a decline in the general price level, we call it deflation. Yeah. Similarly, in microeconomics, we will also be talking about the decision in terms of employment of labor. But we are not talking about how many workers a particular firm is employing, but we are talking about the total labor force in the economy in the different industries. Yeah. So when we talk about macroeconomic, we are looking at the aggregate level, yeah? The whole economy. So what are the topics commonly discussed in macroeconomics? So normally the first component of the discussion in macroeconomics will be on the national output and human well-being, because this is the most important indicator that can represent the economy's growth, yeah, or the economy's well-being, yeah, of a particular country. So this is the point in which we are able to compare the economic performance of a country for a certain period of time. Yeah? For example, this year compared to last year, or compared to many years before that, yeah, or this decade compared to the previous decade, and so on. And it can also be used to compare economic performance between countries. Yeah, for example, between Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia and Egypt and so on. Yeah, because the way how the national output is being measured follow a certain standardized guidelines, yeah? And therefore that would enable all countries to make an accurate comparison in terms of the economic performance. Yeah? And then we will be talking about macroeconomic issues and goals. So this will be the discussion next week, yeah, macroeconomic issues and goals, together with the role of the government and fiscal policy. Yeah? And then in week, this is week 5, week 6, in week 7, we will have the discussion on money, financial institution, and financial system, as well as the function of the central bank and the monetary policy. Yeah? So these are the two important stabilization policies that we have. Yeah? Fiscal policy, which will be discussed next week, and monetary policy, which will be discussed in the following week. And finally, we will have the discussion on international trade and cooperation, which will be the topic of discussion in week 8. So what are the important macroeconomic goals that we have? Yeah? So normally we will be looking at issues related to economic growth. Yeah? Previously, economic growth has been given great emphasis, because in order to increase the well-being, the welfare, the standard of living of the people in the country, the economy should grow. Yeah? However, we have seen that in the previous decades, growth in terms of output may have implication on other areas. For example, negative implication on the environment. Growth may increase the size of goods and services available to the people, but if the distribution of income is not good, then the rich may be benefiting more than the poor, and therefore the majority of the people will not be enjoying the fruits of the economic growth. That's why in recent years, we have been looking at the concept of sustainable development rather than economic growth alone, because sustainable development will include many areas, not only in terms of the increase in the output available to the people, which basically refers to economic growth, also improvement in various areas of human development in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of education, in terms of improvement in health services, in terms of reduction in income inequality, poverty eradication, sustainable environment, and so on. Yeah. And then another important macroeconomic goal is full employment, because we know that people need to live with dignity. People need to have jobs for them to earn their livelihood, to support their families, and so on. Yeah? And therefore, achieving full employment would always be among the highest priority in many countries. Yeah? And then price stability. Yeah? In history, we have seen many problems arising due to high inflation. In some countries, they face hyperinflation, where prices gone up in a matter of minutes. Yeah, and the inflation rate can go even in the millions of percentage. So this is another important aspect: price stability. And also with the frequent financial crisis that we have seen, yeah, in the world, yeah. In Malaysia, for example, we have the crisis in 1997, 1998. Yeah? We have the subprime crisis in 2007, 2008. These are all related to the collapse of the financial system that contributed to the collapse in the real economy, causing economic recession. So financial stability has now become an increasingly important area, yeah, of macroeconomic goals of a country. And then when it comes to Islamic economic system, if you look at the literature in Islamic economics, all the pioneer works, yeah, in Islamic economics can be said to have come to a consensus that the ultimate aim of an Islamic economic system, of course, in terms of the worldly matter, deals with the realization of socio-economic justice and overall human well-being. So these are the two important aspects of Islamic economic system. Of course, the ultimate aim would be to achieve falah, the ultimate success in the hereafter. But in terms of the worldly matter, these are the two important areas: socio-economic justice as well as overall human well-being, which I would try to highlight some of these issues later in the presentation. Okay, what are the components or actors in the macroeconomy? So we have the private sector, the private sector in which we have firms. There are different categories of firms: proprietorship, partnership, cooperation, and so on. Yeah? And then we have the household. So these are the two private entities, household as well as the firms. We also have the government, the public sector, and in terms of an Islamic economic system, we also give emphasis on the role of the third sector. And all of these sectors, all of these actors interact in these three different markets: in the factor market, in the product market, and also in the financial market. Okay, factor market represents the market in which resources or factors of production are being exchanged. For example, we can have land, properties, labor, as well as financial capital being exchanged in the factor market. For example, household would be the owners of the resources, and then firms would be the one which would demand for these resources, put them into production, and offer them in the product market. So in the product market, we have goods and services being exchanged. So the role have changed now. households are the ones who would be on the demand side. Yeah, so household will buy goods and services from the firms. Yeah, and the firms will be supplying goods and services to the household. And in the third market, in the financial market, this is where financial capital are being sourced. Yeah, funds for investment, funds for government borrowings are being sourced for public infrastructure. And this can be in the form of loans from financial institution or funds secured through the money market or even capital market. Yeah? So money market represent short-term funds, yeah, less than a year. Normally, that's the definition. While capital market represent financial capital that are sourced more than a year in terms of its maturity. Okay, as I highlighted earlier in my introduction, the circular flow of income and expenditure model is a very useful, even though it's a simple diagram, but it's a very useful model to explain how these different actors, yeah, how firms, household, the government, the financial institution interacts in the economy in these different markets. Yeah, and it can also give us some basic understanding how stabilization policies, for example, fiscal policy or monetary policy, or even exchange rate policy that the government or the central bank could do, can influence the size of the economy through the changes in income and expenditure level. So basically, the size of the flows, yeah, whether it's flows of income or flows of expenditure, the size of these flows in the circular flow of income and expenditure model, they are actually representing the size of the economy. Yeah. So if the flows are the amount of these flows are shrinking, it means that the economy is shrinking. We are facing an economic recession. But if the flows are becoming larger, it means that our economy is expanding, in which our economy is experiencing economic growth or economic expansion. Okay, let's begin with the most basic model, which is a private closed economy. Yeah? Okay, in a private closed economy, we only identify households and firms, yeah, in the economy. So private means there's no government, closed means there's no international sector. Yeah, our economy is a closed economy. So in this context, if you look at the model, you will see that the inner flow is represented by the black arrows, yeah? the arrows in black, while the outer flow is represented by both the arrows in red and green. Yeah? The red arrows represent leakages from the inner flow, while the green arrows represent injections into the inner flow. The black arrows also represent the interaction between household and firms in both the factor market and the the product market. Yeah? For example, households who are the owners of factors of production would supply their labor or financial capital or properties or land to firms, because firms need these resources to produce goods and services. So when households supply these resources to firms, there will be a flow of these resources to the firms, but in return, they will receive factor income. Yeah, so they will get income in the forms of wages or salaries. If they supply labor, they will get income in the form of rents. Yeah, if they provide land or properties for rental, they will get dividends, or in the context of the conventional financial system, interest income if they provide financial capital. And if they provide entrepreneurial talent, entrepreneurial skills, yeah, they become business owners, then they will bring home, yeah, profits. Yeah? So those are the interaction between household and firms in the resource market or in the factor market. On the other side, the interaction in the product market, when the firms have used the resources they receive from the household, when they use land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial abilities they receive from the household, they combine all of these resources, put them into production, and produce goods and services, and sell them in the product market. Yeah. So household will buy the goods and services in the product market from the firms. Yeah. And therefore you have another flow of goods and services from the firms to the household, and in return the household will have to pay for the price of these goods and services. Yeah? So this is in the form of consumption expenditure. Yeah? Spending on goods and services by the household. However, so there is a leakage from to the inner flow, because not all of the income that the household earn will be used for consumption. Yeah? What else we use our income for? In addition to spending on goods and services, yeah, many of us save some of this income. Yeah, so that's where you can see that red arrow going out, yeah, from the household to the financial institutions or the banks, in the form of savings. Similarly, not all expenditures in the economy is done by the household. Yeah? Some of these expenditures are done by businesses themselves, yeah, firms. This will be in the form of investment. So that can be seen from the green arrow coming in, yeah, from the financial institution back into the product market. Okay, now let us introduce government into the picture. Yeah. So when we introduce the government into the picture, now we are moving from a private closed economy to a mixed closed economy. Mixed means that we have a private sector and a public sector. Yeah. And then when we have the government in the picture, government needs to operate based on taxation. So the government will collect taxes, yeah, from businesses as well as from the household. So now not only that the household will use some of this income for savings, yeah, but they will also need to put away some of their income to pay taxes to the government. Yeah? So another red arrow going out to the government as a form of a leakage. Yeah? So this is taxes. And then when the government receives taxes, they will use these taxes to spend in the economy in a form of public expenditure. There can be two types of public expenditure. The general category, number one, operating expenditure. For example, maintaining roads, maintaining bridges, paying for the civil service salaries, maintaining peace and security. What else? Buying supplies for schools, hospital, and so on. These are operating expenditure. The other category is development expenditure, in which government will build new roads, new hospitals, new schools, yeah, new ports, and so on. Yeah, increasing the number of public infrastructure available in the economy. Now let's introduce the international sector. So when we introduce the international sector, our model has now become a mixed open economy. Mixed means we have the private sector and public sector. Open means now we are open to international trade, international investment, and international cooperation in the form of imports and export. Okay, So when we add the international sector or buyers and from abroad, our consumers, they are not only buying goods and services from domestic firms, shown by the black arrow. They are not only using their part of their income to save to the financial institution, the first leakage. They are not only having to pay some taxes to the government, the second red arrow, second leakage, but they will also be using part of their income to buy imported goods. Of course, many of the things that we use have imported components. So this expenditure will leak out to other countries. It will not come back to our domestic firms, because this will represent an outflow of expenditure and income to other countries, or to abroad. Similarly, not all domestically produced goods and services are purchased by domestic buyers. Other countries are also buying our goods and services. Therefore, the third green arrow there represent the third injections into the economy in the form of exports. Of course, when we think about exports, normally we will imagine our goods being taken outside our border. Our goods being shipped abroad. But we are not concerned about that. We are concerned about the flows of income. Yes, our goods are exported abroad, but the income will be flowing into our economy. Our domestic producers will receive the income by exporting those goods and services abroad. Okay, so we have completed our mixed open economy model, where all the relevant actors or components in the macroeconomy are presented here. So the nature of the macroeconomic management is to influence the levels of these flows. As I said earlier, the size of the flows represent the size of the economy. Look at the black arrows. The black arrows represent the size of the economy's level of expenditure. On the left side, it represents the size of the economy's income. So income and expenditure in macroeconomy theoretically are the same. For example, when I spend 100 ringgit buying a particular bag, a bag, I bought a bag worth 100 ringgit or $100. Where will the $100 or 100 ringgit go? It will go to the seller, right? Of course, the seller will not be able to take everything as his income. He needs also to pay the sorry. Pay the salary of the workers, pay the rental of the premise, and so on. But regardless of that, the total amount of income generated by that $100 or 100 ringgit of expenditure will still be 100. Shared by the different people contributing to the production and sale of that product. So in the context of macroeconomy, expenditure will be equal to income. How much you spend in the economy will translate into an equal amount of income to the people who help to produce and sell the product in the market. Okay, now let's look at potential stabilization policy that the government or the central bank can use. Okay, the first important stabilization policy, which will be discussed in greater detail next week, is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy. By manipulating the amount of government spending and taxes in the economy, The second is monetary policy by manipulating the amount of savings and investment in the economy through the specification of the interest rate or the financing rate. Yeah? As you may be aware nowadays, because of the economic recession in the aftermath of the COVID-19, many countries have reduced their interest rate or financing rate in the financial system in order to stimulate economic activities. But of course, now after a year or two, we have seen that central banks throughout the world has steadily increased it back. So this is the way how monetary policy is implemented in the economy. And then exchange rate policies that can influence the level of imports and export. So if we look at these three different stabilization policy, we can relate those policies in the context of this mixed open economic model on the basis of the circular flow of income and expenditure. For example, look at the role of the government there, collecting taxes and spending it in the form of government expenditure. So this will influence the size of the flows. So if, let's say, the government would want to increase the flows of income and expenditure in the economy, the government can either reduce the amount of taxes they collect from the economy, or increase the amount of government spending that they will spend back into the economy. So in this way, the amount of flows which is represented by the black arrows will grow bigger because the red arrows going out, which is the leakage in the form of taxes, is smaller compared to the green arrows in the form of G. So if you imagine that the size of the economy is like a water tank, like an aquarium, and when you want to clean the aquarium, you will need two hoses, right? One taking the dirty water out, another hose putting clean water back into the aquarium. So if you want to make the amount of water in the aquarium bigger, let's say you are facing a recession now, your level of income and expenditure has declined, so you want to make it bigger, then you need to make sure that the leakages, as shown by the red arrows, should be smaller than the injection, so that the size of the black arrows within that inner flow will increase. So this is the basic understanding of fiscal policy. You can also have a monetary policy. Look at the amount of savings and investment. So the interest rate or the financing rate can be manipulated so that it can change how much people save and how much businesses will invest. And therefore, this will influence the level of leakages, the red arrows, and also the amount of the injection, which is the green arrows. Similarly, in terms of the imports and exports, exchange rate can significantly influence the level of imports and exports. That's why some countries in the past deliberately suppress their exchange rate, and in order to increase their exports, because when your exchange rate is relatively lower compared to other countries, your goods and services will become relatively cheaper in the international market, and therefore your exports will be greater. Similarly, if your exchange rate is relatively lower, your imports will become relatively more expensive. So because of the expensive imports, many of your domestic consumer will shift to buying domestically produced goods instead of buying imported goods. So these are some of the basic understanding of fiscal policy, monetary policy, and exchange rate policy. Okay, the remaining 10 minutes of our discussion today, we will look at the role of the third sector. Yeah? Because when we look at the circular flow of income and expenditure model earlier, all the activities in terms of the interactions between firms and household, as well as the interaction with the financial institution, the government, and the foreign buyers, they are all activities captured in the market. Yeah? Many of activities in the third sector or voluntary sector, they are not part of the market, since these activities are voluntary in nature. As long as a particular activity does not involve any monetary payment, it will not be captured as part of the national economic output. Yeah? So many of these activities which are beneficial to the people, contribute to the well-being of the people, are left out, yeah, from the calculation of national output. On top of that, the third sector is a very important component of an Islamic economic system. Yeah? It can be said to represent the soul of the Islamic economic system, in which Islamic economic system is based on the concept of cooperation and shared responsibility. Yeah? And thirdly, in recent years, we have seen that there has been an increasing recognition of the third sector institutions available in our Islamic legacy, yeah? Such as zakat and wakaf, that can significantly contribute to the well-being of the people, in addition to the role of the government and the role of the private sector. Yeah? Therefore, it is important for us to recognize the third sector in an Islamic economic system. So when we include the third sector into the circular flow of income and expenditure model, we are able to see that there are many sources of economic well-being for the household. Yeah? So we can have household being benefiting from income received through the employment opportunities from the firms. This is in the form of factor income. It can also be in the form of public services that are being provided by the government to the household. And now, because of the presence of the third sector, we also have social goods and services provided by the third sector to the household. Yeah? And in addition to that, we also have informal arrangement, because household can be categorized into poor and wealthy household, as I have shown earlier in my earlier presentation. So in the box representing household, there will still be a flow of transfer, from household who are better off to the poor household. So those are the sources of welfare or well-being that are available to the poor household. Of course, the discussion would need more time, but later when I share the presentation with you, I will make reference to the description of this diagram from a paper that I have prepared as well. Yeah? So from this modified circular flow of income and expenditure model, we would be able to identify 4 sources of well-being, in the microeconomy. It is not only coming from the private sector. For example, the role of the private sector in creating wealth and income to the people through jobs, creating jobs for people to work, and therefore these people will be able to support their families, and so on. And also the role of the public sector, yeah, through its redistributive role, yeah, providing public goods and services, as well as public transfers, yeah, public transfers to help the poor. Yeah. And then we have the third sector, providing social goods and services, as well as facilitating transfers, yeah, because third sector can also be said as an intermediary for transfers. Yeah? It can be through the public transfer if they receive grants from the government, or through private transfer if they receive donations or corporate social responsibility from firms as well as wealthy households. And finally, even though uh, we don't recognize communities, neighborhood, and so on as a formal sector, yeah, because they are not registered, but they have also contributed a lot. Yeah? Just look at what had happened during the COVID-19. Yeah? It is not only government, corporation, and charity organizations that had made a lot of arrangement to provide assistance to the poor, yeah? But also individuals, yeah? Neighborhood, Grab riders, and so on, where they don't have any formal institutions. Yeah? They do it on the basis of informal arrangement. So all these are the four areas in terms of the sources of well-being that are available to provide different goods and services, as well as sources of income to the people in the economy. Okay, finally, based on what I have presented earlier, realizing equity, yeah, or distributive justice as one of the important macroeconomic goals in Islamic economics should not only be addressed at the third level. Yeah, the third level that I have highlighted here is the redistributive level, in which you can have transfers, donation, corporate social responsibility, zakat, wakaf, yeah? Being given to the poor or the disabled or the underprivileged groups in the economy. But it must also be addressed at the earlier two levels. Yeah? Pre-production. Pre-production means the state in before production takes place. Yeah? In order to ensure that everybody has equal opportunity, the government or the third sector or the corporate social responsibility role of firms should provide equal opportunity in terms of education, healthcare provision, and so on, so that these people will have the ability, physical ability, mental ability, as well as financial ability to engage in the production process and earn income through the market. Yeah. And then there must also be a mechanism to ensure that the distribution of income in the resource market are equitable, so that there should not be discrimination, or, for example, nowadays there's an issue of huge gaps between the top management and the ordinary workers in some industries. For example, a top management in a corporation may be earning 200 times, yeah, the salary of an average worker in the company. So that represents huge gap. Yeah? So this is related to functional distribution of income, so that people will have fair income or just income to everyone. Yeah? And then only whenever all of these are being put, and still you have a huge amount of inequality, then you will need to use redistributive mechanism to somehow help the poor, because some of these people, they may not be able to actively engage in production. For example, certain people who have severe impairment or severe disability. So for these people, they are not able to earn their redistributive mechanism. So these are some of the important aspects of macroeconomic aspect from an Islamic perspective that I want to share to the different aspect of macroeconomic dimension with this basic overview of macroeconomic. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Right. Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Dr. Nizam, for your lecture. We'll take the questions for your lecture at the end of today's class, inshallah. So let us continue first with the lecture by Prof. Ruzita. Prof. Ruzita, are you in?
Yes. Assalamualaikum.
Okay. Before I pass the floor to you, let me read some of your background. Prof. Ruzita has served at the IIUM since 1987. So she is currently the head of Disability Services Unit, IIUM. Her current research project include the formulation and applications of Integrated Development Index, IDEX, based on Maqasid Al-Sharia as a new comprehensive approach to measuring human development funded by the Islamic Research and Training Institute. So inshallah, the right person to talk about human well-being to us. Throughout her career, she achieved so many achievements, among which she was presented with a special award for academic achievement for persons with disabilities in conjunction with the International Day for Persons with Disabilities by the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development, Malaysia, for the year 2012. So with that, Prof, I would like to pass the floor to you. We can't wait to listen to your lecture, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zara. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, all right. So first of all, I would like to thank the IIIT and the Center of Islamic Economics for inviting me to also be part of this program. Yeah, so I would just like to share the little things that we have done right at the department together with the department members. And the topic given to me is on the national output and human well-being. I'm not too sure whether Dr. Nizam and the earlier speakers have covered in terms of the measurement of national output. Was it covered before, Dr. Zara? No, it wasn't. Okay, so okay, since we have not covered that before, I think we can. I think I will start with that first. Yeah, we talk about national output and human well-being. In macroeconomics, this is a continuation of the discussion on the macroeconomics. As we know, in macroeconomics actually look at the macro or the overall performance of the country, right, as a whole economically, and we look at growth and we look at how the economy progresses. Yeah, but there must be a certain way as to how we can actually measure the economic performance of countries. So one of the ways that has been the conventional way of measuring it, the performance of the economic performance of a country, is by looking at the national output. Yeah, I think this is a term that we come across very, very frequently, right, in literature, in the media, and so on. By national output, from the economics perspective, we talk about national described or defined as the total market. It's actually the total market value of all final goods and services produced and sold during a particular year. So this is actually the actor or the official or the formal definition of national output. Yeah. So essentially, what it does is that it tries to measure the total production of a country. So in a way, the country is actually seen like a large single producer. All right. So how do we measure the country as a large producer? And the way we measure it is by looking at the national output. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you look at the definition again, there are actually three components in the definition: total market value of all final goods and services produced and sold during a particular year. The first component is total market value. So it is actually the measurements of the goods and services included is actually based on the market value or the current market value of all the goods and services, meaning to say whatever prevailing price at that particular year, that will be the price that the computation will be based on. So in other words, when it is done that way, the value of the national output is considered to be what I call in nominal terms, nominal terms, as opposed to the real terms. The real terms means that the national output is actually measured based on one particular year's price, so that the value does not incorporate changes in price level. So once we do that, we have actually taken out the effect of inflation, and when we have done that, we actually can measure the actual real increment, increase or decrease in the output level in the country. Okay, so this is in the nominal terms. So national output is usually measured in nominal terms. But we can always compute it in real terms. Second component. Okay. Second component, it looks at the final goods and services produced and sold. It means to say that it will not take into account intermediate goods, the value of intermediate goods, because the value of the final goods and services have already incorporated the value of the intermediate goods. Because usually prices of goods are actually set based on all the input, cost of inputs being put into the production of the good. So if you were to put in also the intermediate goods together with the value of final goods, then there will be a problem of double counting, right? Double counting. So to avoid that, to avoid double counting, okay, we only take into account all final goods and services, and we do not take into account intermediate goods, such as raw materials and so on. Okay. All right, the third component is that it is measured, okay, national output is measured based on a particular year, right? So this one is usually a fiscal year, 1 year that we normally look at, so that it can be consistent with all other countries. This comparable, So so these are the three components in the when we measure national output, and what are the measures that we normally come across, when we look at national income and output? Three very common indicators or measurements that we normally come across is what we call the gross domestic product. In short, we call it GDP, right? Secondly, the GNP, gross national product. And the third one is gross national income. They all sound similar, right? They all sound similar. Sometimes they're interchangeable. So sometimes they're interchangeable, but there's a slight difference between the three, all right? So we talk about the first one, gross domestic product. Because of the domestic component there in the nomenclature, okay, it actually includes all goods and services produced and sold within the geographical background, okay, within the geographical boundary of the country, okay, regardless of who actually produces it. It can actually be produced by a local producer, or it can also be produced by a foreign producer, as long as it is produced within the country's boundaries. So all those goes into gross domestic products, GDP. But what about the gross national product? Because it's called the gross national product, it actually includes all goods and services produced and sold only by nationals of the country. Okay, only by nationals of the country, regardless of where it is being produced, whether it is produced locally in its country or it is produced abroad. Okay, as long as it's produced by the national of the countries or the national own producers. Okay, so this will be included in the GNP. So Malaysian companies operating abroad, their production will be included into GNP. Okay, but it does not go into GDP, right? That's the example. Okay, now what about gross national income? Okay, so but the fact that it's called income, it actually includes all income received by all resources, resources or factors of production involved in the production of goods and services. I think we have come across the term factors of production, right, in economics. So basically, this is labor, land, labor, land, entrepreneurship, okay, and capital. Yeah. So these are the factors of production, and the income received by all these factors of production, okay, will be included under gross national income. So the way it is computed is different. It's based on the income received by factors of production as opposed to the value of goods and services as in GDP and GNP. Okay, so as you can see, these measures, okay, are all based on gross values, yeah, gross values, gross domestic product, gross national product, and gross national income. Sometimes you do come across terms like net domestic product, yeah, net national product, net national income. How do we, what is the difference between gross and the net values? Okay, the difference is only the value of depreciation. Okay, so if you were to subtract the value of depreciation of capital from the gross values, we can get the net values. Okay, we can get net domestic product, net national product, as well as the net national income. So it's very easy to remember that way. Okay, so apart from this, okay, the other thing that we need to know is that for each dollar of GNP, yeah, that is being recorded, it is actually equivalent theoretically. It should be equivalent to each dollar of final sales. Okay, so and if there is no depreciation to capital, no taxes, and no other charges on factors of production, theoretically, the value of GNP should be equivalent to the value of national income. Yeah. So in this case, if we were to look at the calculation here, okay, GNP minus depreciation will give us the net national product, the NNP. And from there, if you were to subtract the indirect taxes and all other charges on factors of production, we will get our national income. Yeah. So sometimes we can get the value of national income in an indirect way like this. Okay. Okay. Now like this. Now, why is it that sometimes we do it this way? Because sometimes it's very, very difficult to get the actual or the accurate information about national income. Why is that the case? Because this is how national income is being computed. Yeah. In most developed countries, they also record, yeah, the national income, in their reporting. Based on these components, but in many developing countries, these are not reported because basically it's very difficult to get accurate information from the stakeholders. Yeah. So basically, what are the components here? Compensation to employees. This is basically returns to labor, right? It's like wages. Okay. The factor of production is labor. Okay. And then corporate profits and proprietors' income. These are returns to entrepreneurship. Yeah. So corporate profits for large companies. Proprietors' income is for sole proprietorship. Yeah. And the third one is rental income person. This is for land ownership. Yeah. The return to land ownership is rental, and the net interest would actually be the returns to capital. All right. So capital, labor, land, and entrepreneurship. Those are essentially the four broad categories of factors of production that we refer to in economics. So these are basically the returns to the factors of production. And normally, how do they get this? They get this from, when we submit our income tax returns, okay, income tax. But people actually declare, okay, how much income that they receive, right? Companies declare how much income that they receive. Sometimes it is, most of the time, governments find that the values are actually underreported, okay, underreported. So because of that, it does not truly reflect components of national income, and therefore most of the time developing countries, they don't actually report national income based on the actual computation, but they can actually report it in an indirect way that we have shown like this. Okay, the national income that way. Okay, so these are some of the common measurements of national income that we have come across. Yeah. All right. Now, there are also other measurements of national income. Yeah. So personal income, for instance, there's another measurement that we come across. As opposed to the national income, personal income actually is the national income measure of income received from all sources, including from government transfer payments, such as scholarships, such as subsidies, right? So those are all included under personal income, but they are not recorded under GDP, right? Because GDP is purely based on production. Transfer payments like government gifts and so on are excluded. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the next measurement that we also come across is personal disposable income. Yeah. Personal disposable income is very easy. Okay. It is just personal income minus our personal tax payments. Yeah. So essentially, okay, the disposable income is actually the clean pay, right? The clean pay that we get, or clean income that we get, that we can actually use for expenses. Yeah. Okay, so this is personal disposable income, right? Okay, right. So now when we talk about GDP, does GDP measure human well-being? Okay, now based on what we have seen, these are purely accounting measures, right? Purely accounting measurements. It does not really include, any component of that indicates human well-being. Yeah. So GDP by design, okay, was actually not designed to actually measure welfare or human well-being. Okay, it is purely designed to measure production capacity and economic growth of a country. Yeah. However, sometimes or many times GDP often treated as a measure of a nation's development. Okay, unfortunately, right, where GDP is sometimes combined is being used to reflect economic prosperity and societal well-being of a country, which is actually not very true. GDP has a lot of limitations. Okay, just now as I've mentioned, okay, it does not include transfer payments. Transfer payments are like gifts, subsidies, scholarships, right, or any other allowances from or gifts from the government. These are not included. Yeah. All right. It also doesn't include voluntary sector, like Dr. Nizam, I managed to catch Dr. Nizam's lecture earlier. Okay, voluntary sector is not included, right? Although these are very, very productive activities, okay, if they were to be evaluated at market value, the value will actually be very high. But because it is a voluntary sector, it is not included. It is a non-market activity. All right. So only goods and services which are transacted, okay, in a market are included in the GDP. Okay, those which are not transacted in the market, such as voluntary activity, such as our mothers cooking at home. Okay, these are not included in the GDP, although these are of high value. Okay, of high value. So this is another limitation of the GDP. It also does not reflect, the quality of life, right? Because the high GDP or high economic growth can actually also be accompanied by, for example, high pollution. Okay, high pollution or high social ills, okay, in the country. So it does not actually reflect or represent quality of life. It does not indicate also income distribution. All right. So a country may have a very high GDP, all right, but there may be at the same time a very high income disparity as well, right? So high income disparity is not good because it actually gives a big distinction between the rich and the poor, and a very imbalanced share of the country's wealth. Yeah. So again, GDP does not have the ability to measure that. Okay, so because of all these limitations, okay, there is actually a need to view development in a holistic way, and how to measure human well-being. Okay, when we talk about human well-being, this is essentially related to human development, right? Human development and human development must be looked at in a very holistic way, right? Now, this kind of thinking, all right, looking at development in a holistic way, is actually not a new thing. Yeah, this is actually not a new thing, even in the conventional perspective. Yeah, over the decades, okay, so many years already, many economists, okay, have looked at development in a much wider perspective. Okay, taking a more holistic approach. Okay, I think somebody raised a hand. Can we keep it to the end, perhaps? Yeah.
Yes, Prof. You keep it to the end.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned, okay, for many decades, development has taken a much wider connotation. So although we still have our GDP, GNP, GNI, okay, as the measures of development, okay, we now find that there are various other multidimensional indicators that has been developed. Yeah, so there are various works that have been done. These are just a few, okay, over the years by Nordaus and Tobin, Obscure, Mayo et al, and many others. Yeah, so okay, these are all efforts to develop a more holistic way to measure human well-being or human development. Yeah. Now, if we did a survey, okay, of various indicators, right, development indicators, and we have actually categorized it into different development frameworks, okay, based on okay, three criteria. Yeah. So the criteria are based on the objectives, based on the dimension, and based on the attributes of the indicators. We have actually categorized, okay, the development indicators into three development frameworks. Okay, the indicators basically operates within a framework, right? So the first framework is what we consider to be human development. The second framework is what we call the social development, and the third framework is what we call sustainable development. Yeah, so based on the three criteria. Yeah. Okay, let's look at the first one. Okay, when we talk about human development framework, this is the first category that we have identified. Okay, based on the literature. Okay, we've seen that there are many indicators falling within this criteria, within this framework. Physical quality of life index, the new index of development status, the human development index, okay, and then we have the beyond the HDI, and then there's also this meaning in life index, okay, MILI, okay. Now, what are the objectives of this human development framework? Basically, to develop and maximize the potential of human being. Secondly, to achieve self-actualization and to meet all the basic needs, okay, including physiological, safety, love, esteem, and so on. So those are the objectives, okay, and it focuses on the individual level, okay, in terms of the dimension, and the attributes that it incorporates include the physical attributes, okay, emotional as well as spiritual and the intellectual attributes, okay. So this is quite comprehensive in a sense, okay, all right. Right, it's similar to what we will actually propose later on in terms of the from the Islamic perspective. Yeah, okay. So it's the Human Development Index. This is the first category. The second category is a social development framework. Yeah. Okay, so the various indices again that we come across, okay, that falls within this framework. Which number one is social development index, okay, and then there's also the gender-related development index. There is also the gender empowerment measure, okay, and then the human poverty index, multidimensional poverty index. I think this one many of us are familiar with. And then there's also the corruption perception index. Also, I think many of us are familiar with that. CPI is not consumer price index, it's corruption perception index. Now, what are the objectives under this social development framework? Okay, we can broadly, compile it. The objective is actually to improve on the welfare and quality of life of individuals. And secondly, to develop societies towards a more equitable, inclusive for all members of the society. All right, so the dimension actually involves interaction among members of the society, yeah, and attributes include all social aspects, including health, education, equality, freedom, security, right, etc. So this is for the social development framework. Okay, now the third one is what we call the sustainable development framework. Yeah. So the objectives are to meet the economic, human, social needs of the present and sustain the development as a whole to ensure future generations to meet their own needs. Yeah. All right. And secondly, as for the dimension, okay, it involves interaction with individual, the society, and nature, and focuses on sustainability for the future benefits or advantage. Yeah, attributes include multidimensional perspective, right? Includes economic, social, and environmental aspects. So among the indices that we can see is index of sustainable economic welfare, okay, survey of sustainable human development, and at that time there was a preliminary analysis of composite indicators of sustainable development. Okay, but now we know that we have a full-blown sustainable development goals introduced in 2015 by the UN General Assembly, and these goals are to be achieved in 2030. All right. Okay. Right. So the alternative development of alternative indicators, right, to human well-being, okay, that we can see in the conventional sense, okay, actually is actually similar or in line with the Islamic position on development, okay, especially when we look at the higher objectives of Sharia or Maqasid al-Sharia. I think we have, I think in many of the lectures earlier, we've touched about Maqasid al-Sharia, okay, the higher objectives of the Sharia, yeah. So the Maqasid al-Sharia provides a framework that can actually be used to measure development in a more comprehensive way, yeah. Okay, so the major focus of past literature on Maqasid was actually on developing the theory, okay, mainly legal dimensions, but more recent works actually tries to apply Maqasid in various disciplines, right, in all areas of disciplines, including economics and finance, yeah. Okay, what is this concept of Maqasid al-Sharia, yeah? So we know that all Islamic rulings are basically aimed to be blessings for all creatures, okay, and designed to protect the benefits of mankind. And Maqasid al-Sharia are the objectives, purposes, intents, or ends behind Islamic rulings. So Jasir Auda, the works by Jasir Auda, okay, is one of the main references that this area, okay. And according to Al-Ghazali and Al-Shatibi, the necessities are classified into 5 components, namely preservation of religion, okay, preservation of life, preservation of intellect, preservation of posterity, preservation of wealth, okay. And when we apply, okay, Hanif actually, our own Prof. Islam Hanif, applied the religion development relationship and split the level of necessities or daruriyat into 2 parts, namely the religious, okay, dini, and the dunyawi, the worldly daruriyat necessities, yeah. Okay, and how do we apply, okay, Maqasid Sharia in development studies? There are actually many contemporary Muslim scholars and economists who have come up with studies, okay, and tried to develop indices, right, to incorporate Maqasid Sharia, yeah. We have Dar 2004, who introduces the Ethics Augmented Human Development Index, yeah. And then we have Anto in 2011 examines the development of the OSCE countries using Islamic Human Development Index, or we call it IHDI, okay. And the works by our own department, myself, Salama Yusuf, Prof. Aslam Hanif, okay, Mustafa Muhammad, and Dr. Ghafur Ozif, okay, constructed what we call the Integrated Development Index, yeah. We call it IDEX, yeah. And then there's also a study by Kasri and Ahmed, who conducted a study using a Maqasid Sharia-based multidimensional poverty measure, right, MSMPI. Now these are some, okay, there are many more that has been developed. These are the selected ones that we have highlighted here. And today I would just like to share what we have developed, you know, in the department in trying to capture the more holistic aspect of human well-being in what we call the Integrated Development Index. Yeah. Okay, so essentially, this our IDEX is also based on the Maqasid al-Sharia, okay, the 5 components there, right? And we base it on Al-Ghazali's theoretical framework of Maqasid al-Sharia. Yeah, so there are 3 levels there of the Daruriyat, Hajiyat, and Tahsiniyat, yeah. And under the Daruriyat, there are the preservation of a deen, Hifzul Deen, Hifzul Nafs, Hifzul Aqal, Hifzul Nasl, and Hifzul Mal, the 5 components there, all right? And okay, what is different in this in what we have done is that we have tried to incorporate, looked at the definition or derive the definition or the operational definition of each of these components, each of the 5 components, yeah, by looking at the Quran and Sunnah, okay, and secondly from the Torah, okay. So based on the findings, right, the content of the Quran, Sunnah, and the Torah, we have come up with these operational definitions for each of the component, okay. Every component, we call it the preservation, okay, preservation of religion, okay. The first one, preservation of religion or deen, okay, looks at the preservation and development of human faith through spiritual enrichment, okay. Embracing good moral standards and performing religious practices at the individual, family, and ummatic level. Yeah, so that's the operational definition of a deen. Secondly, preservation of life. Okay, a nafs. Okay, ensuring the existence, sustenance, and development of human life through the fulfillment of basic needs, both physical, spiritual, and moral social needs, and its protection from threats. both human and non-human. Okay, so it's very important to preserve the life. Okay, the thirdly, okay, utilizing preservation of intellect or akal, utilizing and developing the intellect and safeguarding the mind from negative influences such as drugs and superstitions. Okay, all right, and then for the fourth one, preservation of posterity or an-nasl. Okay, this is a protection of everything that would ensure the survival and progress of the family in all dimensions: physical, material, spiritual, emotional, and the preservation and development of future generations. Yeah, so that's preservation of posterity. And the fifth one is preservation of wealth. This one involves the protection of ownership and property from damage, harm, theft, exploitation, or injustice. Okay, it also encompasses the acquisition and development of wealth by making it available through circulation and equitable distribution, as well as preserving the wealth through investment and good governance. Yeah, so these are the operational definitions of the 5 preservations. Okay, something that we have tried to capture so that these are a bit measurable when we come to developing the index, okay, or the indices. Okay, so how do we measure the index? Okay, so based on the operational definitions, okay, we identify what are the dimensions, okay, what are the dimensions of the 5 components, and what are the elements for each dimension, and from the elements there, we try to identify what are the indicators that we can actually use to actually construct our integrated development index, okay, or the index. Okay, so for the first one, for instance, the component of a deen or religion. Okay, the preservation and development of human faith through spiritual enrichment, okay, and so on. It is actually a way of life encompassing the belief system, act of worship, and the moral, ethical values and conduct at the individual, society, and state level. So if you were to come up with the table for it, yeah. Okay, so we actually identify 3 dimensions, okay, in terms of the belief system, okay. The belief system, number 1, and then the second one is acts of worship, both in terms of rituals and general forms of worship. And the third dimension is in terms of the moral, ethical values or conduct, yeah. And then for each one, okay, of these preservations, we will look at it at 3 levels: at the individual, society, and the state level. Yeah, so for the belief system, yeah, okay, the elements, okay, what are the elements that goes into each dimension? Okay, so at the individual level, for instance, okay, the element that goes under the belief system is the pillars of belief, okay, the 5 tenets of Islam, okay, and the 6 tenets of Iman, okay, and then avoiding shirk, that goes under the belief system at the individual level, okay, and then at the society level, okay, under the belief system is preventing whatever may affect the qata'i or absolute foundations by protecting the means of transferring the knowledge of deen to generations at present and in the future. So the belief system here covers at the individual and the society level. Yeah. Now, there's none at the state level. But we talk about the acts of worship, yeah, rituals as well as in the general form. At the individual level, this will be the pillars of Islam. Okay. And then also seeking religious knowledge of Aqidah and Ibadah, okay, at the individual level. At the society level, this would include communal prayers, social religious activities, and enjoining good and forbidding evil, okay, at the society level. And then the element at the state level will actually be freedom of worship. Okay, these are the suggested, okay, or the proposed elements, okay, for the second dimension. And then for the third dimension, moral, ethical values of conduct, okay, protecting against anything affecting Aqidah or Ibadah, okay, at the individual level. And then honesty and trustworthiness, avoiding riya and so on, okay. Then for society level, upholding moral values. And then at the state level, adherence to Islamic law, curbing the spread of corruption, prohibition of false beliefs and ideas of superstition, okay, that will be at the state level. So this is one example, okay, that in terms of the preservation of deen, yeah. So the columns there represents the dimensions, okay, and the content for each column and for each row there represents the elements. So in terms of how do we measure, okay, let's say the belief system, the first dimension, the belief system, acts of worship, and so on. So one way is actually we can look at the religiosity index, okay. Of course, it is a very crude way of measuring religiosity, okay. So, but at the macro level, this is one potential index that we can actually use to be incorporated into the IDEX to represent this dimension. Yeah. Okay, but of course, if the index is being utilized at the micro level, it can actually include more components of measuring religiosity, right? For instance, it can be actually based on a survey, right? Survey conducted on the respondents. Okay, so they can look at the various components of religiosity to get or to capture a better indicator for religiosity at the micro level. But macro level is a little bit difficult to obtain. Yeah. Okay, and then for instance, for measuring moral and ethical values, okay, we can try to utilize World Value Survey. Okay, okay, and then the World Giving Index is also another one. Crime Index, yeah. Okay, and also the Corruption Index. Okay, Transparency International Corruption Index. Okay, these are related to the elements, okay, in the table just now. All right, so this is how we do it, okay, identifying the dimension and the elements and identifying the indicators to be included in the computation, okay. So those are the some of the indicators that can actually be used, right? But there can be other indicators that are newly developed that we can actually incorporate into the computation. So that's for the first component of ad-din. Second component for an-nafs, okay. So this one refers to the physical and spiritual dimensions of man, with regard to fulfillment of his basic necessities and rights. Okay, so in this case, okay, so the dimension there is broken down into two dimensions, the physical needs as well as the spiritual needs. All right, so at the individual level, we have the three elements in the physical needs. Okay, fulfillment of human physical and biological needs. Okay, general protection of human life from harm and danger in its natural environment, and then prohibition to commit suicide. So that's the individual level, yeah. And then at the social level, fulfillment of social needs through the achievement of good governance, equitable distribution of income and wealth, right? And then at the state level, includes protection of the right for good health, okay, protection from harmful or lethal food or substances, protection of human life from human and non-human threats such as diseases, right, such as COVID-19, okay, that like what we have experienced recently. Okay, and then the spiritual needs, okay, what are the elements, okay, at the individual level is fulfillment of spiritual or psychological needs through moral and spiritual upliftment and through khushu or submission and contemplation during prayers, okay. The social level, fulfillment of social needs through the achievement of brotherhood, social equality, gender equity, and family and social solidarity. While at the state level, it will be the fulfillment of intellectual needs through education, right? Protection of human rights, respect for human life, protection of human dignity, and political democracy. Yeah. Okay, so based on this, okay, you can see some are quantifiable, some are not really quantifiable, right? Like khushu, for instance, these are some of the issues that we face, right? In terms of how do we actually measure or give values to come up with the index. Okay, so the challenge there is actually to come up with measurements, okay, to measure the unmeasurable. Okay, so at the macro level is more difficult to get, but as I mentioned, as similar to the first dimension, that ad-din, okay, at the micro level, this can actually be collected, okay, from survey data. All right, so at micro level, it can actually be workable, inshallah. All right, so how do we actually measure the physical needs and the spiritual needs? Okay, these are among the indicators that we can use. Okay, we're not saying that these are the only ones. Okay, just proposing these are the potential ones. Like for instance, the poverty index. Okay, which is the mean shortfall from the poverty line. Okay, we can get from the World Bank data. We can also utilize a multidimensional poverty index. Yeah, we can also utilize the crime index. Okay, the good governance index, and also the life expectancy at birth. Okay, so these are a few indicators that we have that we propose to incorporate. Okay, and then how do we measure spiritual needs? Okay, some indicators that can be used perhaps can be Universal Human Rights Index. Okay, and similar indicators for DEEN that we have mentioned earlier. Okay. Right, so this is for the second dimension, nafs. Okay, the third one is preservation of al-aqal, okay, hifzul aqal. This would be the use of human intellect, which develops through acquiring and utilizing knowledge to distinguish between right and wrong, and how we safeguard the mind from negative influences such as drugs and superstitions, and how we are able to perform functions of comprehension, imagination, contemplation, and critical thinking and balanced judgment. Yeah, and in the table, okay, we have actually come up with two dimensions for this hifzul aqal. The first dimension is on development of human intellect. The second one is on safeguarding the mind. Okay, and what are the elements? Okay, so at the individual level, acquiring and utilizing knowledge, which means education, comprehensive thinking, critical thinking, balanced judgment, distinguishing between right and wrong, right? At the social level, this will be the highest standard of education, more productive collective researches, resolving social problems intellectually, comprehensive thinking, critical thinking, balanced judgment, okay? And at the state level, provision of effective educational institutes and facilities by constant enhancement, provision of financial assistance for students and researchers in various disciplines, and mass media as a tool for freedom of expression, the concept of shura, for instance. Okay, so that's for the first dimension. For the second dimension of safeguarding the mind at the individual level is the avoidance of intangible negative influence and effects of shirk, superstitions, rumors, gossips, etc. Okay, and then avoidance of tangible negative influences and effects of drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes. So that's at the individual level for safeguarding the mind. The social level for safeguarding the mind includes establishing the concept of tawheed, bringing a healthy generation, reduce the damage of drug abuse, alcohol, and cigarettes. Yeah, and at the state level would be eradication of illiteracy, establishing the concept of tawheed, bringing a healthy generation, reducing the damage of drug abuse, alcohol, and cigarettes, and using mass media as a tool. Okay, for al-amr ma'ruf nahi munkar. Okay, so how do we measure? Okay, we can try to utilize the knowledge economy index from the World Bank, which takes into account whether the environment is conducive for knowledge to be used effectively for economic development. Okay, so this is one way that we can measure, but of course there are the others are quite difficult to measure. Okay, another one is the indicator under the KEI. If you have to look at that under the World Bank, there are various pillars. It has got economic institutional regime, okay, educational and skills, information and communication infrastructure, and also innovation system. Okay, so these elements or these components can actually be utilized for the construction of the IDEX. Yeah, and what about safeguarding the mind from negative influences? You can use indicators of prevalence of current cigarette smoking. Take the average, perhaps. Okay, current smoking of cigarettes, current smoking of any tobacco product, recorded alcohol per capita, for instance, total alcohol per capita, point prevalence, drug use disorders, okay, age standardized death rates due to alcohol and drug use, and so on. Okay, there are various that we can use from the social indicators. Okay. All right. So for the fourth component, okay, which is an-nasl, it refers to the stability of the family institution through marriage for the continuation of progeny and the protection of everything that would ensure the survival and progress of the family in all dimensions. Yeah, physical, material, spiritual, emotional, and the preservation and development of future generations. Okay, so we divide it into, or we identify two dimensions. Yeah, under an-nasl. The first one is stability of the family. The second one is continuation of progeny. Okay, And the stability of family at the individual level, we talk about chastity, okay, and lowering the gaze, okay, marriage and education. At the society level, the social norms on ease or encouraging marriage, and social sanctions against relationships that are against the family institution. At the state level, ensuring effective marriage and family laws, education and family education. Yeah. While for the second dimension, continuation of progeny, there is none at the individual level. We propose at the society and state level, where divorce is discouraged, okay, or is prohibited for unnecessary reasons, and the punishment of adultery and qazaf. Yeah. So in terms of the indicators, some of the indicators that proposed is the singular mean age at marriage, which is an estimate of the average number of years lived in a single state among those who married before age 50. Okay, and then divorces include divorce rates, contraceptive prevalence rate, mortality rate, illegitimate birth, age standardized suicide rates, and so on. Yeah. So these are some indicators that we can utilize to incorporate under the this component, the fourth component. For the last component, Hifzul Mal refers to all resources which Allah has made subservient to men and can be defined as anything has value, including the rights and benefits of ownership based on the concept of khilafah. And it entails accountability with the objective to restore social economic justice and mutual benevolence. Okay, so we actually divide or identify 3 dimensions for this component. Okay, the first one is khilafah or stewardship, rights and benefits of ownership. Second one is socioeconomic justice. The third one is ihsan or mutual benevolence. For the first dimension, at the individual level, khilafah rights, okay, and benefits of ownership includes property and wealth, investment, no hoarding, transparency in financial transactions, no corruption. Yeah. At the societal level, we talk about transparency in financial transactions, no corruption. And at the state level, we talk about property rights, okay, free trade and market economy, freedom of enterprise, transparency in financial transactions, good governance, and access to capital for the poor. Yeah. And for the second dimension, socioeconomic justice, at the individual level, we try to include zakat, waqaf, charity, circulation of money. All right. And then at society level, it looks into investment, charitable activities and events, opportunities for employment. At the state level, investment, income redistribution, social development goals, zakat and waqaf institutions, opportunities for employment. Okay. And for the third dimension, okay, at the individual level, again, we look at zakat, investment and charity. Okay, and at the society level, investment and charitable activities and events. At the state level is investment, income redistribution, social development goals, and zakat and waqaf institutions. Yeah. So some are similar in terms of the elements. Yeah. What are the indicators that we can use? Okay, these are some that we can use. Adjusted GDP per capita, for instance, or GNI per capita in purchasing power parity terms. Yeah, the proportion of a population living below the international poverty line, okay, can actually be a measure. The International Property Rights Index, and also the Index of Economic Freedom, okay, that we can potentially utilize to measure this component of the IDEX. Okay. We can also include the vulnerable employment rate, okay, all right, and also the paid employment to population ratio, the Gini coefficient index, okay, that measures income disparity, and we can also include the World Giving Index score, all right, to indicate the level of charitable activities, okay, that has taken place. All right, so those are the way that indicators that we have, identified, okay, so far that can be included in the measurement of IDEX, yeah. But it is still okay, can be improved further in terms of the identifying the indicators that can be included. The challenge is actually how to quantify, okay, the elements. Okay, the elements are easy to identify, but the quantifying action is actually the challenge. Okay, right. Also, there are also other challenges. Okay, how we can actually improve this further. The challenges that we face is actually developing a framework based on concept for contemporary settings. There are varying opinions, there are varying or diverses in approaches, okay, in what constitutes development, how to measure it. And another challenge is, okay, when the study looks into the Torah, okay, how to contextualize the writings in Torah for measuring development in a contemporary setting, okay, and then interpretation of the Quranic verses and Hadith, okay, and how we can relate it to measuring development. Those are also the challenges that we face in consolidating all information to construct the operational definition of each component, and of course identifying the relevant indicators. And there are also unavailability of important indicators to measure some of the elements. Okay, some or many of the elements are actually non-quantifiable, especially at the macro level, but it can potentially be measured at the micro level if primary data collection is done. Okay, so basically those are the things that I would like to share with you, okay, in terms of national output, okay, how we measure it, okay, and some of the developments and other alternative measurements for human well-being, and what we have done, okay, at our level to introduce our an alternative measure for human development, looking at the Integrated Development Index or IDEX. So thank you very much. I welcome questions from the floor. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
All right, thank you. Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Prof. In fact, thank you so much to both of our speakers, Dr. Nizam and so Prof. Ruzita, for the useful and also very informative lectures. Okay, so I think we should go straight to Q&A, right? So I have some question. Maybe we can start with Dr. Nizam first. If you're still here, okay, he's still here. Dr. Nizam, we have one question for you.
Yes.
What is Islamic view on inflation that occurs frequently and suggested solutions and how to cope in such situation?
Thank you very much, Dr. Zara, for the question. Can you repeat the question again?
What is Islamic view on inflation that occurs frequently and suggested solutions and how to cope in such situation?
Okay, thank you very much. I believe I have shared earlier in the presentation that price stability is one of the important microeconomic goals in Islamic economics. This is even more important in the context that in Islamic financial system, we don't have interest payment. In conventional economics, normally the impact of inflation is covered partially by the interest income received. For example, if somebody save 1,000 ringgit and the inflation rate is, let's say, 3%, then the loss from this inflation in terms of the purchasing power can partly be covered by the presence of interest income from paid to the savings. But this is not there in the theoretically, this should not be there in the context of an Islamic financial system. So when we face with the issue of inflation, we need to identify what are the causes to this. An increase in the price level due to, for example, supply shocks. This is something that naturally happening, and therefore the government needs to deal with this in other ways. But if the increase in the price level is caused by certain manipulation or externalities in the market, then the government need to remove this kind of exploitation or the element of zulum in the market. Coming back to the first issue, for example, now we are facing inflation in many countries because of the supply shocks coming from the war in Russia and Ukraine due to the shortages in supply, and also because of the uncertainty price of oil and gas has also risen. These are all things which are caused externally, and therefore the government needs to deal with this issue by providing support to the people who are most affected by this, particularly the poor. So there should be a mechanism to provide subsidies or transfers to these people to provide assistance in dealing with this increase in the price level. If we are looking at the price level increase due to the elements of exploitation, for example, we do have from time to time firms and companies coming together with a collusive agreement in a covert manner in order to increase prices for the people, hoarding of goods in order to push the price up. So in this context, the government should play its role in making sure that the elements of hoarding or manipulation or even the presence of monopoly power should be checked in the economy, so that the price prevailing in the market should represent the natural interaction between two demand and supply, and without those exploitation or manipulation from certain people in the economy. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Nizam, for the response. I would like to pass the second question also to Dr. Nizam because it is related to inflation and also some combination with microeconomic aspect. So in a situation where there is inflation in the economy and the cost price of commodity has gone high, if we sell at old prices, we cannot afford to buy the goods again. Can we increase our prices? I think this is from producer's perspective.
I think this is something that is naturally happening because of supply shocks, as I said earlier. Even in during the time of the Prophet, some companions came to the Prophet asking the Prophet to set a price for certain goods during the drought season because of the low supply of that good in the market. But Prophet did not agree to this suggestion. And let the market determines the price. This is because there's no elements of exploitation, elements of manipulation. The price that is prevailing at that time is the natural price equilibrium through the interaction of the demand and supply in the market. So from this tradition, we have recognized that Islam has identified the market when the market operates without any elements of injustice or exploitation or the elements of hoarding or monopoly power, then whatever the prevailing price should be respected. But of course, if the price goes too high, then there's a role of the government to intervene, to provide support to the poor people who may not be able to buy, especially if these goods and services are essential goods and services for the people. So on the part of the producer, of course, it is commendable if they are able to absorb some of this increase in cost when they want to sell it to the public. But producers will still need to survive as well. They still have families to sustain, and therefore when it comes to cost push inflation, where the supply side, where there is a shock in the supply side, I think from the economic point of view, it is fair for the producers to increase the price according to the increase in the according to the conditions of the market. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Nizam, for the response. Next question to Prof. Ruzita. Is Islamic economics talking about the Islamization of capitalism or an alternative economic system?
Okay, thank you to the question. Well, it is actually not really an Islamization of capitalism, okay? It is actually a different approach to of worldview, okay? Because capitalism has got its own worldview, but Islamic economics have got its own worldview, all right? So if, let's say, if I were to relate to the how we measure human development, for instance. Yeah, even though, for instance, there are alternative measurements proposed by the conventional economists, yeah, that also contain a spiritual component, for instance. But that spiritual component is actually of a different nature compared to the Islamic perspective. Yeah, so we tend to actually say that it is Islamic economics is like combination between capitalism and socialist system, but actually it is really not. Okay, it may look similar to appearance, but in spirit it is actually different. Okay, in terms of worldview it is different, right? In terms of the approach is also different. So I would like to think of it as as a more a unique way of a Tawhidic approach to looking at Islamic economics, okay, based on the Islamic perspective. If, for instance, we look at the IDEX, we talked about the fulfillment of 5 components, for instance. These are actually basic needs. If we relate back to the theoretical suggestion by the Al-Ghazali's, this theory, so it is actually based under Daruriyat. Okay, the 5 preservations are based under Daruriyat. So these are actually basic needs, okay, but we don't see that as as part of the capitalist system. The capitalist system would is survival of the fittest, okay, for instance, and then as long as it brings value to the economy, okay, it can actually be produced, but it's not so easy. It is not it is not like that in the Islamic system. We must first actually need to fulfill the basic needs. Perhaps, for instance, if I can give an example, I think many of us do not know, because we are online. We are online here. We don't see our lecturers in person. Actually, Dr. Nizam is blind. Okay, Dr. Nizam is blind. Okay, Dr. Nizam, sorry, I have to mention that. Actually, it's a plus point for him. Okay, he has visual impaired, and myself, I'm a wheelchair user. Okay, so both of us, okay, we have disabilities, but in many countries, okay, and especially in in many countries, especially in developing countries, the basic needs are actually not fulfilled for the person with disabilities. All right, so in fact, we have to actually look at it in that sense. Okay, if you were to approach it from the Islamic perspective rather than the conventional approach, okay, the basic needs for everyone needs to be catered for first, okay, regardless, okay, whether they are for marginalized group or not. So nobody should be marginalized, okay. So that should be the approach in an Islamic system, if we can actually relate it that way. But in the capitalist system, no, okay, capitalist system, whoever can actually provide the value in production, wherever there is demand, it can actually be produced. Okay, so supply creates its demand, supply creates its own demand. Okay, so a kind of situation, but not in Islamic economics, but based on principles in the Quran and Sunnah, right? So certain things, basic elements, basic needs must actually be catered for everybody, and it is based on the Maqasid al-Sharia, right? And these are the things that we need to measure, right, in terms of how we are able to fulfill, okay, how Islamic economics is able to fulfill the needs of the people, all right, the society, right, as a whole, and also as of the individuals in the society. So to me, to my own opinion, is that it is not actually Islamization of capitalism. It is actually a different Tawhidic approach to looking at Islamic economics.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. Okay, the second question also to Prof. Ruzita, I think, in terms of sustainable development of all components, how to strengthen green growth, green economy, or green sustainable development in order to make balances comprehensively.
Oh yeah, green development is actually important. It is actually very in line with the Islamic worldview. In fact, it's talking about the preservation, right? Preservation of the environment is also very, very crucial, and also especially it relates to also a preservation of an nasl. A nasl is not just for the progeny, but the progeny must also be able to enjoy, okay, the green, okay, and the world as it is preserved, okay, by all the generations. How you can do it, okay, there has to be some regulations in place, right? Regulations in place that not just regulations, but it needs to also be a culture. It has to be a culturalized, okay, within the society. So when we talk about making sure or trying to implement anything, we should not just be talking about penalties or regulations, but we also talk about educating the society in order to promote preservation of promoting green economy, right? So that the sustainability is there for all generations, yeah. And that's why we have all the maqasid components there. That's why we have the preservation of akal, right? Intellectual, right? And as well as the deen and so on. So all these components of the maqasid actually takes care, in terms of the educating part as well as the penalty components as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Prof. One question to Dr. Nizam. Is this micro and macroeconomic dichotomy already present in the classical Islamic economic tradition, or has it emerged in the contemporary Islamic economic, is this micro and macroeconomics dichotomy already present in the classical Islamic economic tradition, or has it just emerged in the contemporary Islamic economic tradition because it is influenced by the modern Western theory?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zera. Basically, this is something that we follow from the Western economic tradition. Of course, if we look at the history, even the Western economic history was based from philosophy. So it comes from philosophy and then into politics, and later it emerged as economics as a separate discipline. Similarly, in Islamic tradition as well, the ethics related to consumer behavior and producer behavior are there in the teachings of the Quran as well as the teachings of the Prophet. We have collections of hadith and also Quranic verses related to how you should deal in economic matters. So we have this there in our primary sources as well. We also have Quranic verses talking about a broader picture. For example, macroeconomic goals related to the circulation of wealth or income inequality. We also have Quranic verses related to the importance of integrity and transparency. So all of these are there, but when we try to frame it into micro and macroeconomics, we are very much benefiting from the Western economic tradition, as long as it does not contradict with the principles of the Sharia, our primary sources of knowledge. Then we should not be rejecting all of this beneficial knowledge. So this is what Islamization of knowledge is all about. Trying to see what beneficial available knowledge we have, whether it's Western or Eastern, from Africa, from China, from all over the world, and see whether these knowledge are compatible with our worldview, our principles, Sharia principles, our own ethical framework. If they are, then it's fine, because we want to claim that knowledge in Islam is universal knowledge. And of course, whenever there are elements which are in contradiction with our principle, we should reject them and build new ones. So this is what I think the approach should be in developing Islamic economics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nizam. Looking at the time, maybe one last question, one good or short question to end our session. Perhaps this is to Prof. Ruzita. Any hope of adopting this in any Muslim countries? I think this is referring to IDEX.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Actually, yes, I think there is potential that we can adopt it. In fact, there is already one PhD study being done on the state of Kalimantan at the micro level, where this IDEX has been adopted to measure at the micro level and measurement of religiosity, and some other measurements can actually be quantified, right? Yes, I think if we can fine tune the index, better, inshallah, there is potential that we can adopt it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. Ruzita, for your response. Thank you, Dr. Nizam also. Dear participants, I'm very sorry. My sincere apologies that we are not able to take all the questions. But there's always opportunities for you to reach the individual lecturers through the emails that have been provided in the brochure. So let's say you need further clarifications on any issues or questions, please try to reach the lecturer through the emails. And also rest assured, both of the slides will be made available through our class platforms like WhatsApp. And on top of that, you can also get our materials through our CIE. There is where you can get all the lecturers' emails as well as the slides. Okay, so I think it's 1 p.m. in Malaysia now. I think it's a good time to end our class today. Inshallah, we'll meet again next week. Thank you so much, speakers, and thank you so much to participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.